Our closed session ran a couple of minutes late. We'll convene in about 2 minutes. Okay, so it is 7:05, and we're calling to order the meeting of the San Leandro City Council. Today is Monday, March 17th, 2025. It will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you're able to stand, please do. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And that day is today. Today is the day that we believe in liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Aguilar,
Present.
Councilmember Azevedo,
Present.
Councilmember Bolt,
Here.
Councilmember Simon,
Present.
Councilmember Viveros Walton,
Present.
Vice Mayor Bowen,
Present.
Mayor Gonzalez.
Present.
Please note all members are here.
City Manager, you have an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members and community members. Mayor and council members, I am pulling item 9A, presentation of the Downtown San Leandro Community Benefit District Annual Update. From tonight's agenda, the item will be brought back to the council at a later date.
City of San Leandro conducts orderly meetings to fulfill its mandate. Discriminatory statements or conduct that would potentially violate the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964 and or the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, California Penal Code sections 403 or 415, are per se disruptive to meeting and will not be tolerated. Please see the City Council Handbook and City Council Meeting Rules of Decorum for more information. Madam Clerk, your message.
Thank you, Mayor. If you would like to make a public comment during the meeting, you can do so in person or via Zoom. If you are present at the meeting, please complete a speaker card and submit it to the city clerk before the item is presented. If you wish to participate in public comment via Zoom, you can use the raise your hand tool when the item is called. During the public comment session, speakers will be invited to speak and will have a set time to share their comments. A countdown timer will appear for their convenience, and when the time is up, the microphone will be muted. All raised hands outside of public comment will be lowered to avoid confusion. Once public comment is opened, hands may be raised to speak. There will be a 30-minute window for public comments, which will take place under item 7, public comments, as per the published agenda. After this time is up, the council will proceed with the rest of the meeting's agenda. If you have not had the opportunity to speak during the initial 30-minute period, there will be another chance to do so after item 12, city council reports. Thank you.
Consider a report out of closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. No reportable actions were taken in closed session, but direction was provided to staff.
Thank you. Let's move on to our proclamation. As you'll remember, we recognize American Red Cross Month at the beginning, and we promised to come back for Women's History Month. And we've got Lisa Lucetta, chairperson of the board of Tarani, our favorite flavored syrup company based here in San Leandro. Come on down, please. Yes, I'm locked in, so yeah, I'll walk around. Are you going to open it up for me? Thank you. So lest I break something. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read, and you're going to follow along, and I'm going to give you the mic, and you're going to say some wonderful words. So whereas Congress declared March as Women's History Month in 1987, and International Women's Day has been observed since the early 1900s. Who was founded back in the early 1900s? And whereas women of every race, color, and ethnic background have made meaningful contributions to the growth and strength of our San Leandro community and the United States in countless ways. And whereas women have been leaders in securing their own rights of suffrage and their own rights of equal opportunity, as well as leaders of the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and the peace movement, each of which have created a more fair and just society for all. And whereas even in 2025, some women still experience injustices in the workplace, in our community, and at home. Others still struggle to earn equal pay and have their voices recognized as equal. And others don't live lives free of abuse and sexual harassment, even to this very day. And whereas the city of San Leandro is committed to supporting policies and programs that uplift and improve the lives of all women in our community, now therefore I, Juan Gonzalez III, Mayor of the city of San Leandro, do hereby proclaim March 2025 as Women's History Month in the city of San Leandro, and encourage all community members, and I do mean everybody, all community members to observe this important month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Ms. Lucetta.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry to have my back to all of you. Well, I want to say it's an honor to be part of this proclamation and to be here tonight with all of you. Tarani has a rich history and heritage, and Mayor Gonzalez alluded to it. We are celebrating our 100th anniversary this year, and it's significant in many ways. And many of the significance that we're so proud of is to have been founded by my grandparents. And largely the history of Tarani is the history of my grandmother, Azilda Torrey, who led us through past following Prohibition, really was the leader of our business after her husband died when my mother was 8. So we have a rich history of women leaders at Tarani. We look towards our whole community of success. I think it's also a great opportunity for me to say that when we moved here to San Leandro, we moved our entire manufacturing and headquarters operations 5 years ago, and we received such support from the city that I wanted to take this opportunity to be able to publicly thank the city, and to say that we felt so welcomed when we came here by a city and a community that shares our vision and values, a community that believes in opportunity, a community that believes in strong businesses, and a community that believes in providing on-ramps to opportunities so that everyone can thrive. So we're very happy to be expanding here. We, this year, as you know, have inked another 200,000 square feet here, so we're going to represent a footprint of 600,000 square feet. Our team loves being based here. We love being engaged, and we're very happy to celebrate collectively the countless women who have built, led, and strengthened communities, organizations, and businesses over many, many years. So thank you for allowing us to be a part of this.
and she didn't say this, I thought she might.
Oh.
When they received their East Bay Economic Development Association Innovators Award last year, they made a commitment to be more integrally involved in the community. Last week, they rolled out a barista training program in partnership with East Bay Innovations. And that investment in the community of helping people who might not otherwise have the ease of access to jobs, that kind of commitment is the type of community partner that we want in our city. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Somebody's going to want to take a picture around here. Okay, item number 5, consent calendar. Would anybody like to pull something from the consent calendar? Councilmember Aguilar.
I'd like to move the consent calendar.
Councilmember Azevedo.
I would just like to make a comment about 5F. I want to thank our staff, Vincent, and all the staff for putting this forward and getting this through, because it's really important that we get this park, Halcyon Park, fixed. It's in my neighborhood. I've been going to it for over 40 years, and it's burnt down. I see kids go there, and they're disappointed because they can't play. So thank you to the staff for this. Appreciate it.
And just to confirm, that was the second as well, correct? Yep.
Yes, I'll second.
Thank you so much. Anybody else on this item for commentary at this point? Then we'll go to our public comment on this item.
Mr. Mayor, there is no public comment on consent.
Online and in person, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. I'll close public comment. I think I'll just make a quick comment. I think we've had some discussions, city manager and I know a couple of other council members, about just being attentive to change orders. And so here we talk about giving authority to approve change orders, particularly in light of what we'll talk about tomorrow night. We do face a structural deficit, and our attentiveness to change orders and really expecting more of our vendors. Obviously, there's an opportunity for cost overruns, but that being said, we really want to be very attentive to change orders. So with that, let's vote, please.
All votes are in. Motion passes 7-0.
Did you have something on that item? Councilmember Aguilar. Okay. So moving to item number 6, any additional reports today? Seeing none, we'll proceed. Public comments. This is the time for the public to comment on items that are not on our agenda. And again, we're very sensitive to double dipping. So if it's on our agenda and you're talking about it, I'm going to cut you off. So we wait for the agenda item to speak about the agenda item. So is there anyone who would like to speak on items that are not on our agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I have 2 public comments in person and 2 online.
Okay, let's proceed with online first.
Okay. Lucas, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. I apologize for raising my hand during public comments section. I tried to raise it at the consent calendar stage, but we moved very quickly, much faster than usual through the consent calendar, which I guess is a good thing. But I just wanted to make my standard comment, and I guess the mayor also alluded to the substantial amount of change orders. You know, every single item that I see here, almost every single item has 15% change order sort of attached to it as a default. And I would hope that sort of in the future, the city could become better maybe at planning and forecasting, such that the necessary upfront cumulative change orders are within on the order of 5%, maybe not 15%. I see pretty much everything as 15 or 10% cost, anticipated cost margin. And that seems a little bit big. I won't make my usual comment about, sort of the California minimum wage and the federal minimum wage. I just really want the council to, consider strongly being a good fiduciary of the public finances. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Katz-Lakabe, you may unmute yourself.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, city staff, and members of the public. My name is Mike Katz-Lakabe. And I think, speaking of financing or finances, it would be good to review where San Leandro's money is invested at this point to ensure that we are not invested in any companies that are currently controlled by a Nazi oligarch who is doing his best to destroy what is remains of our federal government. I think that while the fiscal concerns are definitely important, I also think it's important to maintain moral clarity about where our money is and to what types of organizations and people it supports. So I would encourage the city to take a look at that to ensure that none of our money is invested in the company Tesla in any way, shape, or form. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, there is no more public comment online.
Okay, so I close public comment online and bring it back in person.
Derek Barnes.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Derek Barnes with East Bay Rental Housing Association. I'm here just for informational purposes only. I think I left you with some flyers to let you know about a new program that was launched earlier in the year for the unincorporated area of Alameda County, and it's the Housing Provider Resource Center. And we are so thrilled to be a program administrator. The county saw fit to approve this program mid last year, and we officially launched it at the beginning of the year. And this will serve housing providers in Ashland, Castlewood, Cherryland, Castro Valley, Fairview, San Lorenzo, Hayward, and Sunol. Why am I here today? Because we know that many of our owner-operators are throughout the county, including San Leandro. So we thought it would be good to make sure that you all are aware of this program and what it's currently doing to engage more information, getting more information out to housing providers so they know what the laws are, because they're really complex, especially in the county. We also want to make sure that there's compliance as well, and best practices and property management. So we think that this is a program that is certainly, well past its time to be launched, and we're so excited to be a member of one of three members, East Bay Rental Housing Association, the Rental Housing Association of Southern Alameda County, and the Berkeley Property Owners Association, all coming together to provide these critical services to the housing providers throughout the county, unincorporated county areas to support renters. Thank you so much, and I've left you with flyers for additional information.
Douglas Spalding.
Rafael Pedrag, son Louis. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm doing a little crafting project. Don't ignore me. I haven't been able to come to any of the budget things, so I thought maybe I'd take an opportunity tonight to give a little swing at it. To me, it says a lot about priorities, right? We set our priorities according to what we decide to spend money on. I think Lake Chabot Road is not a priority in my mind. Reopening the marina is not a priority in my mind. And yet, right, we've been saying as a city for a few years, housing is a priority. Mental health is a priority. And it just struck me again, like there's a slide we're going to see later on. There are 4 positions in the housing department. 2 of them are unfilled. How is housing a priority if we only have, even though they're the 2 most fantastic people in the world, there's only so much they can do, right? And human resources Not really much more. And yet we look at the police department. There's a structural problem. Not that, right, our police department isn't also excellent, but it eats up 60% of the budget, a big chunk of the budget. And yet we haven't filled all the positions. I don't think we necessarily make ourselves safer as a community if we do fill those positions. Maybe it's a little bit akin to the army in Ukraine. They have to do more with less. But if we're serious about making housing and human services and people a priority in the city, something has to shift. We can't pay for it all. This is something, I've learned in life. I can't do it all. I'm getting more limited as I get older. Something I learned as a parent, something I've learned as a teacher. Sometimes the best thing to do is to say no. And yet I can't think of a time when you ever have said no. And that includes all the cost overruns. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Juan?
I work with a lot of immigrants and small mom and pop housing providers. A lot of immigrants also live in a duplex or triplex and rent out the adjacent units. And a lot of the seniors that I've been working with have not yet still been reimbursed for lost rent and to the tunes of tens of thousands of dollars. And they're really hurting. They need to pay for their medication. And still, we haven't seen anything. And as we're considering new legislation, I just want to point out to the fact that the labor that goes into the essential service of housing and that the people that are painting and doing landscaping and plumbing, that they reimburse for the cost of providing this.
So this is our item 10B, how we think about what we would consider in a potential rent control legislation. Would we consider reimbursement? So I just want to make sure that you're either going to take the time now or take it under 10B.
Separate topic, not talking about.
And do not speak about anything related to the cost of uprating, because we will be discussing that as part of that item. So
just
let's
reimbursement.
stay focused on something much more general that does not relate to rent control.
Okay, not rent control, but just reimbursing for the services that have been rendered and to consider the most preserving the most efficient way of providing housing because the other solutions to housing are solutions, but they might be 5 times more expensive with overhead, office staff, and all that kind of thing. So we want to also preserve pathways out of poverty for people who are working class folks who are working on weekends and doing extra time so they could provide for their family and put them, kids through college education. So the opportunities that impact of these policies should be considered and to help them as they're trying to provide for their family. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, there is no more public comment in person.
So we'll close public comment on this item. I have heard some information that I think we need to be very clear. I've heard this number thrown around that we spend 60% of our budget on the police force, and that's not an accurate number. Sometimes people conflate firefighting and police. Sometimes they do it relative to the general fund, but the short answer is we do not spend anywhere near close to 60% of our budget on police. So I want to be very clear about that. So moving on to our next item. Item number 8, we have no public hearings today. As we heard, our presentation was pulled. So let's move to item 10A. For this item, we're exploring resolution to approve a one-time appropriation of unspent funds, and we will have a presentation first by Finance Director Nicole Gonzalez, or has that been passed on to Felicia Silva? Yes?
Yes, Felicia Silva, Assistant Finance Director.
Thank you.
Thank
Please
you.
proceed.
All right, Mayor Gonzalez, members of the council, again, Felicia Silva, Assistant Finance Director, and we're here to discuss the year-end audited financials and financial position. The independent audit, the annual comprehensive financial report did come to council in February. And in this presentation, we're going to, again, discuss the year-end financial position. It's always important that we wait until after the annual audit to make sure that we've accounted for any reconciling items, as well as any of our Government Accounting Standards Board's reconciling items or requirements. And that being said, I will dive into some of the financials. So I'm going to walk you through this slide. There's a lot going on. And so from left to right, we have our budget. So that's our final adjusted budget. And that includes carryover, budget adjustments, et cetera. And the next column would be our actuals. So we have budget and actuals, and then we have our delta column, which is the variance between budget and actuals. So from there, I'm going to take us from top to bottom. And we've combined information from two charts that's hopefully a little more easily understood. And if you have any questions, you can let me know at the end. But in the beginning, we always start with our beginning balance. So that's our reserve. So starting with our reserve, and I do want to point out that we actually did have a reconciling item this past fiscal year in 23-24, and that was related to a pension trust item. And that was accounted for in the annual comprehensive financial report in 2023, but did not make it into our financial system until 23-24. So with that, you'll see that we've started with a positive balance, reserve balance of 97.3 million. And then we had the reconciling item of 7.7. And so then our final beginning balance at the beginning of 24-25 is 89.6 million. And if you're following along, I'm primarily focusing on column C. So again, taking it from top to bottom, starting with our reserve. From there, we look at our revenues and expenditures. And revenues, if they're greater than expenditures, they will add to our reserve balance. If expenditures are greater than revenue, they will draw from the fund balance. So in addition to revenues and expenditures, we also did have some carryover at the end of fiscal year 23-24. And carryover, those are items that and initiatives that are still in progress that have been previously approved by City Council that has been authorized to carry forward into fiscal year 24-25. So those funds are no longer available. So once you take that into consideration, looking again at our revenues minus expenditures, we had a draw, if you will, of fund balance of 18.5 million. From there, that gets us to our ending fund balance. So again, starting with the beginning fund balance, we drew 18.5, so we get to 71.1. Once we get to the ending fund balance, there are certain designations that we need to make. Some of our funds are non-spendable. That could be a permanent fund, such as an endowment, which you never plan to spend the funds, loans to other funds. We also have sometimes restricted funds, and restricted funds are usually restricted by a third party. And then we have assigned funds. And assigned funds are typically previously approved by City Council, such as encumbrances. So once you take the ending balance and subtract what is then designated as unavailable, you get to 58.1 million. And that is what we call our unassigned fund balance. Once we get to our unassigned fund balance, we also then have some designations that we make for major emergencies. We want to take the $5 million and set it aside in case we have a major emergency. We do have a policy regarding economic uncertainties, which is 20% of expenditures. So Then we also look at compensated absences. This is one of our government accounting standards boards. We call that GASB requirements. And those funds are set aside for compensated absences, and compensated absences are for time off that employees have accrued that might become due and payable. So we want to set that aside. So once we take what we have that's unassigned, again, looking at row 15 or 58.1 million, we need to set aside 5 million in case there's an emergency. We have 31.8 million set aside by policy for economic uncertainties. Based on our accounting standards and requirements, we have 708,000 that's set aside for compensated absences that might be due and payable. That gets us to about 20.6 million that's left in undesignated available funds. So that being said, I'm going to then now just really quickly go again from left to right. We've got our budget minus our expenditures, and that gets us our delta or our variance. We had revenues that were greater than expenditures to the tune of about 4.7 million. Our expenditures were right around budget at $5 million, but we also did authorize $4.3 million to carry forward for those ongoing initiatives that plan to be spent down in 24-25. With that, we end up with a net positive fund balance of $915,936. From there, just walking you through what happens with the ending fund balance, you can see that there's been some movement between designated and unassigned, and that is primarily because we were able to move one of our assigned items. We actually spent, and that's the pension trust item. And also we had 1.2 million that was part of our, it was set aside for a community impact. We met that obligation, so we were able to set that aside. And then you can also see that there's been some positive changes between what we were required to set aside for compensated absences, and with economic uncertainties being 20% of expenditures, there's also a positive balance there. So all that being said, our unassigned grows to about 2.5 million, and overall positive fund balance of 3.3 million. Next slide. Just a quick recap. Our revenues were greater than planned. We had higher than planned utility users tax, sales tax, property tax, offset by lower than expected real property transfer tax. Again, our expenditures came in right around budget. We have already budgeted 4.3 million in carryover. We cannot budget that again, so we take that aside and we get to the unallocated balance of 915,936. With that, we are here today to discuss the 915,936 and unallocated fund balance. We did bring this to Finance Committee in February with a staff recommendation to appropriate half of the unallocated fund balance to the pension trust and half to fund balance. During our committee discussion, there was no consensus that was reached, and the direction from committee was to bring that forward here to council for discussion and action. I also want to just note that council did have a priority work session in February. As part of that work session, council was tasked with ranking their top 3 priorities and areas for staff in the city to focus on. Infrastructure received 7 votes. In particular, streets and roads was a priority area. At the time, there was a proposal to implement a policy to allocate year-end unspent funds to streets and road repair. No formal action was taken at the council priority work session. That brings us to our requested city council action, and staff recommends that the city council approve the 23-24 year-end financial report and appropriate 915, 936 in fiscal year 23-24 year-end surplus. And with that, we'll answer any questions you might have.
I will offer just one quick clarification. We did not reach consensus, but there was a 2-1 vote for a recommendation coming out of that committee, but we'll let that kind of evolve here. So first questions, we'll then take public comment, and then we'll come back for discussions. Councilmember Bolt, please.
I guess mine is more about procedure. You have $915,000 of funds out there. Is there besides allocating it back to the general fund, what else would you do? Like I don't understand the.
Yeah, so I think just to clarify the request, and I'm just a little bit unclear about something, because I think we have an adopted council policy that says half of surplus will go to the trust. So to be really precise, we already have a policy that says half of this money should go to the unfunded pension liabilities. There is a question, though, as to what happens to that second half, or if somehow we want to suspend the policy that we already have. But that's not really on the table today. We would have needed to notice the suspension of that policy. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm getting a nod from legal. So it's essentially half of that is already covered by an established policy of the city. And so the real question is about the second half. What do we want to do with that?
I guess, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Like the only thing we can do is put it back in the general fund, right? Well, there's no
But they're
other.
asking us to, how do we want to allocate that money, for what type of program, for what type of purpose? And so I'm going to go to city manager, maybe for a little bit of an exploration of what guidance they're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Bolt. What's in front of you is that staff's recommendation is for the half to go with the pension trust as stated in the council policy, and the other half to go on the fund balance. That is the current recommendation. Council could say, we want to take that other half and do something else with it. One of the things that was mentioned at the council retreat was to take that half and put it directly into roads.
I would like us to follow through with that, put it into the roads account so that we could start.
Oh, let's focus on questions and we'll come back to discussion. Other questions at this time? Councilmember Azevedo, please.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. If we were to allocate the 457,968 towards roads, how much roads can we get done with that? I'm just wondering. I mean, I don't know. I don't think we can repave a full road, but how much? What could $457,000, $458,000 do towards roads? Can somebody answer that?
Can someone answer that on the spot? I do have an answer in my head, but
okay. I'm just
okay,
wondering.
so I'll give you some thoughts. The typical when we repave a road, we have to do the ramps. All the ADA accessible ramps along the sidewalks have to be redone. So one way to think about that is, as we're doing work on the roads that we already have funding for, it's about, I think it's $6,000 to do a ramp. I just want a big picture head nod. Is that about right? Okay, I got a big picture head nod. So you can do the division and say that's however many ramps, 1,500 ramps would be associated. No, that's not good math. Whatever the math is, you can divide it on your phone. That would be the number of ramps that could be replaced. But more realistically, what we're talking about is for a section of road, doing the ramps and the paving. It's $8.08 per cubic yard for a road that's in decent condition for doing the resurfacing. And so you can kind of quickly figure out, again, divide that number by 880 to maintain our nicest roads. And that'll tell you a number of square yards that you could cover.
So What are the actual options for this money? I mean, we can't just like say, okay, we want to allocate it back to the community. We give them all $1,000 each or whatever. What are the options that we can actually put this money towards?
I'm going to go to city manager first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if the money was to go back into the general fund reserve, it can be spent on anything when we come forward to the budget. As the mayor mentioned earlier in this meeting, we do have a structural deficit to balance our budgets from one year to the next. We have to go into our reserve, pull money out to pay our bills. So whatever's in there is going to go direct. It's for the community.
That's all my questions.
Councilmember Veros Walton, please.
Thank you. I have a particular question regarding, I'm specifically concerned about the Community Development Block Grant Program, which is a federal entitlement that funds community organizations, specifically based also on the other priorities that the council voted, housing and homelessness. I'm really concerned about appropriating the $915,000 into just roads when we really don't know how that's going to play out over the next year or two, or specific to our biannual budget process. My question is regarding the CDBG block grant program. It's my understanding that we're kind of at the beginning of the consolidated plan process, or I'm just wondering like where we are in terms of the funding cycle. So that, because I'm looking at that number, and what I'm going towards is, can we keep some of those funds flexible to be able to support the program, the organizations that are currently funded through CDBG? And then when does that cycle begin again? I think it's a 2 or 3 year cycle. I'm not sure.
Okay, so there's a couple of pieces. So I'm going to take a little bit, and then we'll bring up Ms. Carrie Husler to help us out with some of it. The first piece being that we are at the not the beginning. We're getting towards the key moment in our 2-year budget planning cycle. That will come to us, I think, in April for the first review, end of April, beginning of May. Finance Committee, April, and the council in May. So we're about to address those questions head on. With respect to CDBG, we did have the House and Senate approve a continuing resolution that presumably reflects what the president wanted. And so I would expect the president to be in full agreement with that. Under that, as I understand it, there will continue to be essentially funding at current levels, but I would certainly welcome any insights from anyone that we have here around known changes or anticipated changes under the continuing resolution, because there's clearly uncertainty there. And if you can come on up, Ms. Husler, to provide additional insights.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I can speak to the timing of the CDBG consolidated plan and the funding allocations. The city has conducted an extensive public outreach campaign, and we've prepared our draft CDBG consolidated plan and our fiscal year 25-26 annual action plan to position ourselves for funding that will come down the pipeline. We typically receive our CDBG funding allocations during this time of year, which would put us in position to have everything submitted to HUD in May by the deadline. However, we have not received any news, and we have not received any indication of funding. So we are holding the process for actual dollar amounts.
And what were the previous, just the total pot for CDBG in previous years? What was the total number?
Approximately $800,000, $850,000.
So that's the whole pot.
Majority of that is CDBG. A majority of that is for capital housing funds, and then there's a smaller portion for public service funds. And so in collaboration with the Human Services Department, we are starting the two-year cap process to award funding, but we've notified our agencies that we are holding off on making recommendations and bringing it forward to public hearing because we just don't have any actuals.
Thank you for that. I'll go through the whole cycle again and see if I have more questions.
Thank you.
So do we have any more questions? Yes, coming to city manager for elaboration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One thing I will add, because Councilman Veros Walton, you bring up a good point about our budget process, that even if the council decides to go with the staff's recommendation of putting the $457,000 into the fund balance, the council during the budget process, once you see the totality of our financial situation right now, could also decide then to put more money up for roads as well at that time as well. So this decision, whether it's roads or something else, is not final today.
Seeing no other questions, we'll go to public comment on this item.
Mr. Mayor, we have no public comment in person and one public comment online.
Please proceed.
Lucas, you may unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I appreciate taking you guys taking another comment from me this evening. This topic in some ways feels like it was made for me. I remember calling into the budget review sessions a while back. It might have been a year or so ago, where we talked about sort of the projected general fund balance up until year 2032. I think this is in the fiscal year budget 2024-2025. Sometime around like page 11 or page 15, I forget. But there's a projection there, and that projection has the red expenditure line above the green revenue line for every year starting in 2024 up through 2032. That's 10 years worth of projected budget shortfalls. Now, this year, we just got this presentation. It looks like our revenues are 140 million. Our expenditures are 159 million. What's the percentage difference, I ask myself? It's about 13%. So we're about 13%, expenditures over our revenue. And then I go back to the previous comment I made around, how often do we approve 20% cost overruns, 15% cost overruns, 20% cost overruns? Pretty much every time that I call into these meetings, these cost overruns get approved in the consent calendar with very little discussion. That's how we end up with 13% extra expenditures over the revenue that we get. I'm sure that we're good at forecasting budget costs, but we just keep approving these extra expenditures. Like I said during the annual budget planning process, we need to cut spending and raise taxes. Cut spending, raise taxes. I don't know where this needs to happen, but the fund, if we're 18 million under, and we have only 71 million left, we have maybe 5 years left. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, there's no more public comment.
Okay, so I'll close public comment and come back to council members for further discussion. Okay, seeing no further discussion, I would make a motion. If there's not a motion from the floor, I'm going to make a motion that says that we take that surplus and split it 50-50, that we split it 50% going to the pension trust fund and the other 50% going to our roads.
Second.
I've got a motion by Gonzalez, a second by Bolt. Councilmember Aguilar.
Sorry, I was in the queue to second, but.
Okay. Further discussion, please. Councilmember Viveros Walton, followed by Simon.
I'm continued to be really concerned about not having any flexibility with these funds to anticipate what we know a lot of the organizations and basic needs that are being currently served by these community organizations. I would want to propose that some of these unspent funds be earmarked for support, especially as the organizations that were currently funded in the past, they're just based on the landscape, their funding streams, whether it's federal to the county and then to them, or federal, city, and to them, all those funding sources look threatened. I'm really concerned about our ability to keep our social safety net in as much as we can. I would like to propose that a percentage of that, I guess it would be, if half of it goes to the pension and half of it goes to road, then the half goes to road and half stays for preservation of social safety net services in the city?
Councilmember Simon.
Yes, I want to build upon the road recommendation. Half of that balance will go into the roads. This is a concern that I've heard from my district as well as Aguilar's district, many of our districts where we have roads that are in dilapidated condition. They're in such bad condition, they don't meet the criteria to be upgraded, and they get worse and worse and worse. And there was a presentation at the Facilities Committee, I think last year, where the consultant presented that one council member for some period would choose one of these roads, working with the community to come up with a road to be repaired. So I would like to recommend, if this money does go to the roads, that we consider these dilapidated roads that are completely, not complete, but very far along, very far gone, that we do allocate some money towards fixing them.
Vice Mayor Bowen, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with my council colleagues on the importance of putting funds towards fixing our roads. Certainly at the District 5 meeting, the majority of the conversation was focused on infrastructure, and we talked a lot about all of our roads. So it is absolutely a priority. That being said, I really appreciate Councilmember Rivera-Walton's highlighting the current landscape that we live in. And I think that I support setting aside some of those funds. I think she had proposed to do 50, 25, 25 to be able to at least have a stopgap in case something does happen and we want to be able to continue providing these services. And fingers crossed, and we can be optimistic and we're able to actually get the funds that we need, then we can then put those back towards the roads. And so I'll let Councilmember Rivera-Walton. No, okay, I will can I make that friendly amendment? You didn't? Yeah. It's okay, I would like to make the friendly amendment, or do.
So I hear your amendment. So let me express this concern. We, in 1 month, in a month and a half, we're going to come and we're going to look at a proposed budget. And we have the right at that point in time to make a decision about how we allocate $145 million. And at that point in time, we can make a decision to set aside more money in reserve specifically, that we're not going to budget to specific programs to address this risk. At the same time, currently my biggest concern is that we haven't had that discipline to focus on roads, and we've had people come in with bags of their roads and all that kind of stuff. So this is not, to me, an either or, and I appreciate the concern. We were all, or most of us were in Washington, we heard some of the challenges that are there. So, my preference is to wait until we have that discussion and say, city manager, we as a council, we want to set aside this amount of money specifically to support social services. So that would be my preference.
Does it make it more difficult to set aside those funds now? Some of those funds, because again, in a month, we can also say we want to put more funds towards our roads as well.
So my main concern about roads is that we have consistently failed not to do that. And if I see the budgets that we've made in the past, we just haven't spent that money that's necessary. And today we need $12 million a year. And so in many ways, this is a little bit about trying to set that tone more than anything else, because we have access to $145 million in 6 weeks to really make some tough decisions about. So again, it's more about tone setting. It is not about saying no to the needs.
Understood. Okay. So I will not make that friendly amendment then.
Councilmember Viveros-Walton.
I guess my concern, well, I don't guess, my concern is that this is just one-time money that we have the ability to make a policy decision right now. And the budget, I really see it as a long-term policy document that really guides our priorities and our spending. And so I guess what I'm struggling with is that the opposite can also be true, that if we are going to prioritize infrastructure and we're going to prioritize roads, I think that the proper mechanism for that is through the budget, where we make a policy statement and how we're going to spend our money, the people's money. And I definitely see, I hear it too. Roads are crumbling and it is definitely a concern, but people will not eat. People will not have Wheels on Meals. They will not have access to a federally qualified health center in San Leandro if we don't have a safety net service. We have the ability to use one-time money to address a situation that we're facing that is unknown in the near future. So although I agree that, and I supported the infrastructure, I think this is one-time money for a very specific reason. If these organizations, or if we don't end up needing these funds, it'll go back to the general fund, or we can say if the money is not spent, then it can go back to infrastructure. But I really do think that the proper vehicle to state our infrastructure priorities is through the budget policymaking process and not through a one-time budget allocation.
Having heard your concerns, I would like to amend my motion. I would move that we spend half the money as recommended by staff for the pension trust, that we spend 30% of the money on roads and 20% of the money be set aside in the general fund for this specific purpose, as serving as a safety net for the CDBG money specifically. Should that money disappear, then that money can be released to the roads. Do I have a second on that amended version?
I'll second.
Okay, so I've got a second from Aguilar. Any further discussion? Councilmember Bolt.
Yeah, I think that's a great compromise. That's a team working together. Thank you.
So we are going to offer some clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the set aside, not the road set aside, the set aside for the other purposes.
Pension trust?
No, not the pension.
The CDBG, I'll call it insurance. Because there has been a concern expressed that we may not receive our full CDBG allocation.
Well, actually, that's an excellent point, because my understanding is not just CDBG. It's about community partners that may lose their funding and may come to the city, which might not be CDBG money. Okay, that's fine.
May I
Yes, please.
address that? So it's my understanding that CDBG funds are kind of housing money and then public service money, and the public service money funds community organizations. It's my understanding that there's only 3 organizations currently that are being, or 4 that are being funded through this. I think it's Davis Street, Calico, Meals on Wheels, and Spectrum. So it's 4. And that's just a small, am I correct?
We'll have Ms. Usler come up and confirm or elaborate.
Yes, that is correct.
So that's just a small sliver of the organizations that are part of our social safety net in San Leandro. And a lot of those organizations receive federal funds passed through the county. CDBG is just the city. So I actually would like to open it up to to maybe even increase the community assistance grant program, because there's already a process for organizations to be able to access city funds that provide safety net services. It's my understanding. The reason I asked for CDBG is because that was just one of the questions I had, just in terms of where we were in the process for that.
So the reason this is getting complicated, of course, is because we have county money and county is setting its own budget, and we can advocate there for money is the state will be releasing monies independently. We can be advocating there. So I'm trying to keep the motion very crisp and clean, as opposed to just being a blanket allocation.
I understand. I'm okay with the compromise to have it go to the CDBG current public service grants. My concern there is that there are a lot of other organizations that applied that are not recipients of CDBG, that are very worthy organizations that do critical work in the community. So I'm okay with that compromise as it's one-time money, and if we're able to keep the lights on and keep people fed and seniors being able to access services, I'm okay with restricting it to the public service grants of the CDBG pot.
So we still have another clarifying question. So let's just make sure we make it all nice and tight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My clarifying question is for this money that is being held for the CDBG set aside, what is the time limit of holding the money? Is it we use it for the current fiscal year, then release it back to the general fund, or we create a new fund to hold the money forever until we use it?
Yeah, it should be time bound. And I propose in the clarification of the motion that that be for the fiscal year 2026, right? So July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. That's my proposed clarification.
I'm not the seconder of the motion.
Right. I just wanted to make sure that is that clear enough for the
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at my finance team who actually that was their question. So I want to make sure it's okay with them.
Yeah, please proceed, finance.
Can you clarify the question really quick? Again, I'm sorry, just so I can make sure I'm answering your question correctly. Is this if we can?
So the pending topic is whether, so we're going to take the pot of money, 50% pension, 30% roads, 20%, I'll call it an insurance pot. We're going to set this money aside. There is concern that our CDBG grant funding may fall. And so we've got this reserve money, approximately $200,000. That money will be held in a fund for the next fiscal year. If our funding doesn't fall, then the intent of this motion is to release that into roads. If our funding falls, this can be used specifically to offset the loss of CDBG money. So do we need additional clarification from finance?
No, I think that is that's clear, and we can absolutely do that. We can set that funding specifically aside in our restricted fund balance so that it is not used for anything other than the CDBG potential funding shortfall. And after one fiscal year, if that funding is received, we can go ahead and release that to fund roads.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, clarification? Sorry.
I just had a quick question about can you remind me how much funding we get from CDBG for these 4 programs, 4 agencies?
Sure. Let me pull up the actuals. So this current year, we get $121,342 for public service funds for social service agencies. And the way we split that pot is the 4 agencies. Calico is $22,000, Davis Street $30,000, Meals on Wheels is $39,000, and Spectrum is $30,000.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, let's vote, please.
All votes are in. Motion passes unanimous 7-0.
Let's move to item 10, item 10B on our agenda. First reading of an ordinance of the City of San Leandro City Council amending our municipal code TAD chapter 4-45 regarding rental registry, and some further direction from council around other housing protections. We have Community Development Director Tom Liao presenting.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. And thank you, Mayor. I think you actually laid out the agenda for the night, so thank you. Today I'm going to provide some brief background, delve into the proposed rental registry ordinance, do a refresher on existing housing protections, and then moving forward to next steps. So part of how did we get here? So as many of you all know, housing protections were put on as a council priority beginning in February 2023 under the housing homeless priority category, and also moved to the rules in later in November of 2023. As we delved into different policy considerations, which we're bringing back tonight for your feedback, one of the areas that we saw consensus on from the Rules Committee in particular was related to rental registry and the ability to gather important data to inform better policy. So in January of this year, the Rules Committee approved forwarding the rent registry ordinance that they saw, the draft, as well as the proposed staffing cost to the program. And so tonight we're bringing that back to you for the first reading and also seeking further guidance on housing protections. So going through the basics of the ordinance that you have in your packet, the key purpose was to establish a program to be able to collect important data regarding the rental market in San Leandro. And again, this is something we realized that we're not able to collect this data through the private market without having some sort of regulatory ability to do so. One of the key things will be, if this is adopted, to allow for rental housing providers to annually pay a fee to help to administer the program and to submit registration on an annual basis. We're proposing right now probably end of January of each year once this begins. We tried to cut a broad swath. This type of regulation does not get impacted by, say, Costa-Hawkins. So you could actually have a wider net to try to get data from rental properties that are typically exempted, say, from Costa-Hawkins, like single-family homes that are rented out, duplexes, townhomes and condos as well. So there are a list of exemptions in the ordinance, and I'm not going to go through every one. There's 2 slides worth, but we did list them fully. But just to give you an example of the typical types of units that are exempted would be affordable rental housing developments with long-term affordability restrictions, so such as the Maria Alta, La Vereda, Laurel Landing. Those are 100% affordable, regulated by state, federal, and local requirements. Another typical one is what we're doing at the Nimitz. So transitional emergency shelters, also skilled nursing facilities, we're exempting those. Short-term rentals, hotels, motels, they're completely different. And then also we are exempting, in this case, the mobile homes and mobile home lots that are currently under the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Space Ordinance. They have their own rent roll or form of rent registry already. And also units in which a landlord is basically doing a home share. So their home is their primary house, but they're renting rooms. That would be exempted under this one. Wanted to provide a list of what we're proposing to be in the initial rental registry data category set. I think we have a good swath of information that is useful to help staff basically monitor rent changes from over the years. So as you can see, we also have information about a project and the total number of rental units, those that may be exempt from the ordinance, the type of ownership, who the contact people are, and then also I think a critical category or categories would be documenting charges such as utilities and other types of charges. And moving forward, this would be difficult to just manage with existing staff. This would be hopefully over the short, medium term, a self-sustaining, a funded program through fees. At the Rules Committee, we had done some research from existing programs that have a rent registry and such, including Alameda and Mountain View, and had estimated a max. So again, this would be a max of $100 per unit. But we are still sort of assessing as staff as we prepare to potentially implement this, because we want to be mindful that there could be pass-through costs to tenants, and also what would be effective amount to maintain an optimal amount of staffing and administration. And we had some data previously to show how many units could be eligible under this ordinance. Like I said, this is a broader swath than, say, rent control, which would be limited by Costa-Hawkins. So we estimate roughly about 16,000 to 20,000 units could potentially fall under this rent registry. And again, staff had about a couple months back, estimated about $650,000 to provide for 2 new staff, assuming a contract with a third-party consultant to help develop and administer the database, and also to purchase the software for the database and have an annual maintenance subscription cost as overhead. Obviously, that cost will go down after the first year after we buy it, and likely the maintenance cost as well will be reduced after year 1 or 2. But this was an attempt to find an optimal program sort of size and scale to effectively manage this. We wanted to also lay out that assuming that this item is approved in terms of the budget estimate and the adoption of the ordinance, one of the first things that's, and we're basing this on if this gets adopted tonight and for second reading soon, for an effective date of January 1 of 2026, staff would also then take it upon it to identify and assess the more precise staffing consultant needs to implement this program. And so just what are some of the things that are entailed in program implementation? That would be issuing a request for qualifications proposals to select a qualified database vendor. We know through the Rules Committee there's 2 main software providers that are oftentimes used. We also need time to develop and launch the database, prepare public information and materials on a website, and then provide broad outreach to all stakeholders, particularly the housing providers themselves. Some of the challenges we want to just raise and let you all be aware of again is that, this is sort of an estimate right now, and even the number of units that may fall under us based on the business license and parcel data that we have. This is really involving making thousands of housing providers comply. So there is going to be a build-up process to get more full compliance. We've seen this in other cities that have this. And so it will take likely, estimate, we think maybe 3 to 5 years to get more fuller self-sufficiency and compliance for this program. And so, some of our staff costs and fees may be subject to change. They may not be precise, so to speak. We're doing our best to guess or guesstimate. And currently, as I mentioned, we have 4 budgeted housing positions. We did recently, just in the last month, 1 staff person did move on. So we are now having to fill 2 vacancies, and so down to 2 full-time housing. But there will be more burden during the ramp-up period on the existing housing staff as we build this program up. So one of the things we'll be recommending tonight again is for you to introduce tonight's first reading of this ordinance to amend the Muni Code to add the rental registry section, and to also seek your general direction that you are comfortable with the proposed costs for the program in the 2-year budget. And then just wanted to, this may be a refresher for most of you, some it may be new, but I wanted to just cover the current state protections and current local protections that we have for housing. So the big state law that really affects, say, rent control is Costa-Hawkins, and that was passed in 1995. Part of it was the key impetus was to limit cities' abilities to regulate rent on new housing built after 1995. Even that day and age, there was a need to build more housing. So basically, they exempted from rent control single-family rentals, condos, and townhomes, and prohibited vacancy control, meaning that whenever when a unit comes onto the market freshly or new in a new way, you cannot submit that you can start a new base rent, so to speak. In addition, there's AB 1482 that was passed that basically was statewide rent control, and that is currently capped in a 12-month period of 5% plus CPI, not to exceed 10%. And that law, I think that was kind of born out of right before COVID, and that law basically sunsets in January of 2030. In terms of just cause, again, there is state law right now that affects that. That's AB 1482 again, and a complementary bill, SB 567, and it basically sets up just cause requirements if tenants, based on their tenure. Again, that has a sunset of January 2030, and it establishes at-fault and no-fault requirements. And particularly when it's no fault of the tenant, it's say owner move-in, things that may be sometimes logical or appropriate, there is a penalty that needs to be paid or a relocation for that tenant. Now, we actually have a more aggressive tenant relocation ordinance that was adopted in 2017. And so that would actually trump what the state has in terms of a stronger relocation protection. And again, 1482 also creates exemptions for newly built housing, accessory dwelling units, and again, similarly with owner-occupied duplexes and single-family homes. It also covers long-term affordable projects that are exempt from this. There is no statewide requirements for rent registry, and currently there is state law for fair housing, as well as civil code on harassing and threats to tenants as well. City, in terms of city protections, we have the Rent Review Board, which again is not rent control, rent stabilization. It is a non-binding, mutually agreed upon solution with a 5-member board. It's capped at 7% to get a hearing or 2 or more rent increases in a year. And again, exempted from that are single-family homes and townhomes and condos. In terms of, we do not have just cause in the city, but we do have some sort of anti-displacement program services. We have tenant landlord counseling through the nonprofit Echo Housing. We have eviction defense through Central Legal. We have a tenant relocation ordinance, which I mentioned, and we have fair housing, housing discrimination and counseling services through Echo as well. And within our rent review and tenant relo, we actually have some anti-retaliatory language that is in those ordinances. We also have separately, because this is almost a separate issue, a mobile home space rent mobilization ordinance that was adopted in 2019. The purpose of that at the time, or in the ordinance, I'm sorry, was to protect renters from arbitrary, unreasonable rent adjustments and to enable park owners to earn a fair and reasonable return on investment. So that was set as a rent stabilization cap of lower of 4% or annual consumer price index. You can't increase rents more than once in a year. There is, again, I mentioned a rent registry rent roll already in place under that law. And there's also limits on evictions that are guided by state mobile home residency law. So in terms of next steps, staff is recommending that you introduce the ordinance to amend the San Leandro Muni Code to add the rent registry ordinance to provide direction that you're comfortable with the current staff estimate of a proposed budget for the program. And then the part 2 of tonight would be next steps. We are planning to go forth to March 26th Rules Committee, but do seek further direction. And as you did at your annual council planning session, getting more direction on rent control, just cause, tenant anti-harassment, and mobile home space rent stabilization. So we've framed how for each of these, based on the level of public outreach and input and staff sort of workload, so to speak, on carrying out state and federal and local requirements, it would take for each of these items. And we try to provide a range. And so to keep that in mind, these, I would just emphasize that these are all individually very deep, meaty, complex issues. And each of them could be sort of taken individually. I do want to highlight again, there is the distinction that with our staff capacity and size, that these are all important and we understand that. But to be able to do these effectively and seek your assistance in prioritizing them, we are saying that because mobile home rent stabilization is a very different, and management of mobile home parks are very different from rental housing on the regular market, it would be hard for staff to kind of do all that concurrently with rent control or just cause and or tenant anti-harassment. They're very separate processes in some ways, and so we'd like to be able to prioritize them in a certain order if that's possible based on your direction. So with that, I think that is the end of my presentation with about 2.5 minutes remaining, and happy here to answer some questions.
Government efficiency in action. So what I'd like to do is we'll go through questions, then we'll listen to comments from members of the public, and we'll come back to discussion depending on how many questions and the commentary. Somewhere in there, we're going to take a break. Okay, so let's begin with Councilmember Aguilar.
Tom, thank you for the fantastic presentation. I know we've been working on this for many, many, many years. I just have a question with regards to rent control. So does that include a cap, implementing a cap on rental increases?
Right. So the idea of rent control, rent stabilization would be eventually putting a formal cap and making that a binding, situation, more enforceable situation. So
Wonderful. And we're anticipating that within the next 4 to 6 months to Rules Committee?
well, again, based on what we're asking tonight from you all is, again, I'll go back to the slide, is to say on
7 to
part
12 months,
two.
sorry.
So rent control is one topic, right? Again, very deep in meaning and complex in its own. Just cause is one. Two, tenant anti-harassment, because those are the ones that you all mentioned, again, at the recent planning session. And then mobile home, to whether or not to have to revisit mobile home space rent ordinance or not. So again, you could pick a couple of them. I mean, I don't want to limit anybody and whatever, but the idea was to think of them as like an individual list. And if there's ones that are maybe more priority to each of you, that would be good to hear.
I think they all go hand in hand. I'd like to prioritize all of these. I think with regards to the rental registry, you anticipate the program fees to amount to about a $650,000 annual budget. Is that just staff time, or is that working with the third party?
Yeah, I mean, just on the estimate that staff did, and again, subject to it, is basically assuming 2 staff, maybe like a project specialist, maybe a senior level and a kind of a entry level staff member, probably some funds for a third-party consultant that has experience managing the database and developing that, and some overhead costs. So maintaining the database will be an ongoing overhead cost as well.
Gotcha. And thank you for answering that. And with regard
Right before you move on, I'm sorry, city manager's asked to elaborate on the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Aguilar. Just on the recommended action, I wanted to just be clear. All of these things council has said before we want you to work on. But we only have a limited amount of staff to work on a specific thing. So what we're asking for tonight is, what is the one thing that you want us to work on next?
You can please continue. The floor is back to you.
Thank you for answering that. So we have staff recommendation, next steps. So the next steps, you'll come back with this, like say we want to work on rent control. Is that once we finish rental registry, rent control will come back in 7 to 12 months? Are we saying a year? Is that?
The first reading of an ordinance, because it's going to assume basically the 7 to 12 months will be probably, this is going back to rules for refinement, and that's typically what we do, is to take the policy discussion and the first crack at an ordinance to rules. There'll probably be also, your predecessors and other councils have always also wanted further community outreach. So the key stakeholders, both either with tenants and housing providers, to weigh in on the policy discussion and eventually what that first draft ordinance. Our experience will be there will be a lot of input once certain pieces of information come out for public consideration, for rules committee consideration, and that will kind of open up the public comments.
And right before I run out of my time, I mean, I'll say this for my comment, but with regards to the recommended program fees of $650,000 with the Community Police Oversight Commission, we were able to receive a grant through our Congresswoman. Is this something that we will be able to apply for a grant for, to receive funds to help compensate for the funding that we're appropriating or we'll be spending on this particular rental registry?
Well, to your point, I think part of that budget discussion that you heard earlier tonight, right now, we are trying to create a fee-based program so that it will be self-sustaining. Right now, we don't but I can also tell you with federal and state funds, they're often tied to an income restriction. And we know with broader rent issues, it doesn't always just fall on low income. It could also impact people who are middle income as well. So, and that would be, the federal state funds would not allow us to, use the funds for that population.
Gotcha. Thank you, Tom. Those are my questions.
So thank you. Moving on to Vice Mayor Bowen, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tom, for the presentation. I'm happy to see this again. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship or the efficacy of a rent registry as it relates to the other potential housing protection policies?
Sure. Yeah, I think that that's a great question in terms of how a lot of the other cities we've seen, they've integrated into the other policies. You know, rent registry is tied to cities that may have rent control or other. So initially, like I said, there was consensus that this was probably one of the more feasible policy options to move forward with. So it's sort of standalone. But ultimately, depending on what direction you give us on the rental policy direction, we could also see how that would impact, like, for example, the cost of a fee for a program. We would, if you direct us to look at one of those, say, rent control, we would now be probably looking at a fee that would encompass staffing and a budget for both that and the rent registry. So that makes sense as we move forward with this process.
Okay, thank you for that. And I appreciate that it was approximately 16,000 to 20,000 rental units may fall under this rent registry ordinance, and that while there's a 3 to 5 year ramp up to be able to get all of the units registered and potentially collect that fund, that we would get to a place where it would be a self-sustaining program. And theoretically, the staff that would be the scope of work for the rent registry for the staff would also, they would be able to work on potentially other policies as well. They would not be, or would we have to continue, we would obviously still have to, we would have to hire more people.
Well, I think given the nature and size of the staffing you see for housing, for example, and then the budget itself, housing, the reason why staff is so busy is they are working on multiple areas. But having somebody that can dedicate a little bit like more of their time as staff to this will be important. Having a consultant, that's why we're proposing a third party, that person that ideally, or that organization or firm that has experience in this area with rent registry will be extremely valuable to staff if we can recruit for that.
And was did I hear you say that we just lost somebody from?
Right, a housing staffer head, yeah.
Okay, and so we would, and that filling that is part of the 2 vacancies.
No, well, filling, yes, is part of the, right, is one of the 2 of the existing positions, correct.
Okay. And then just so I understand, because if we want to spend $650,000 a year on something, we have to make sure that it will actually be implemented and enforceable. Is that the enforcement component of it, is that included in the $650,000?
Well, I think having staff that can spend more time on the program will help, put eyes and sort of ears on the regulations. Yeah, that would certainly help to strengthen potential enforcement or compliance.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go to Councilmember Azevedo, please.
Thank you for your presentation, Tom. I have a few questions. Some of them kind of got answered, but first question is, what cities are we comparing this rent registry to?
A couple that we've used during the Rules Committee process was Alameda and Mountain View, because they actually have both a rent registry program, but they also have kind of a broader, rent control program as well. So they, we're able to get actual budget data or information from them.
And so I just want to make sure I understand this right in the community. I asked you a little bit about it before the meeting, but so it would be $100 per unit. So if we get about 20,000 units, that could be $2 million we can get in a year. What are we going to do with the if it's only going to cost 650,000? Right. What's going to go with the rest of the money?
So that's a good part of it, is doing the math of what we've estimated. So I want to stress that we said $100 is probably the max. So that's the ceiling. Most likely, and the things that we want to factor in as staff is kind of continuing to assess how to raise what the fee should be. Was we want to make sure, because right now the way it's in the books, we can't. There could be a pass through. We don't have a way to not allow a pass through right now to
So if we
renters.
charge an extra $100,
Right, it could go straight. So we want to be mindful that could be an impact. So how we pass that, and then making sure that really we want to target how do we pay for the 650. So we'll structure a fee so that we can get to about 650, and then maybe if the program grows, then we'd have to factor in inflationary things in the future for those fees. So.
Okay, so, and we mentioned about 3 to 5 years for the full annual analysis, basically. So we won't be able to get data till 3 to 5 years, basically?
No, we can start collecting it, but that is a good point because you're building up more data. That's what we've learned from the cities that have it, because let's say your city of Alameda, for example, is probably, I don't know, maybe at like 65% compliance or 70%, but in their first years, they were, only getting 30% of the people supposedly registering for the registry, right? And getting that amount of lowered fees. So they had to carry part of that program until they've become more fully independent in recent years. So that was the idea, is that there's going to be a lead up time to this process. But there'll be data, and we'll use the data that we get, but we'll get more and more data as each year passes. So in 10 years, you should have a good set of data. That should be pretty, 5 to 10, you should have a clearer set of data that you could use for policy decisions.
Okay. On page 16, we have a rent registry for city business license required to rent units in San Leandro. How much is it costing them $100 per unit also?
Yeah, and I wanted to be careful. Sorry.
That's why I wanted to, and what exactly is that?
Yeah, that was probably not, I think we just tried to simplify it in that table. So it's really not our rent registry. We were saying the closest thing that we have currently to is that the only way we track private rental housing right now is the business license. So anybody who is renting out a unit, even a single family home, has to pay a business license through finance. So that is the only bare data that we generally use. And the reason why it may be inaccurate is because we don't know who's not registering their rental unit potentially. So yeah, so we were just saying that is kind of a proxy right now that we have. It's really not a rent registry like what we're proposing now. So.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Viveros Walton, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a point of clarification because if we're talking about what we have been talking about is rent stabilization and not rent control. I know it sounds super wonky, but I just really want to be careful with language because what we have agreed to is rent stabilization, not rent control, which are very different policies. That is my understanding of the direction from the council before me. But some material says rent stabilization, some material says rent control. I want to make sure that we're unified.
So we can have an extended discussion on that, and I don't know if that's what you would like to do right now.
Well, I'm just point of clarification because I think what we're talking about next steps in terms of next steps for policy, we're talking about rent stabilization, not rent control, but I'll leave that. My other question was regarding the exception to not include mobile home. Can you talk a little bit about, is there an avenue down the road where you're able to merge the two so that you have one system to track all rent stabilized units if rent stabilization goes forward?
Yeah, no, I think one thing that maybe from this presentation would be and this was part of our public outreach that we did about a year ago, both to renters, landlords, and the mobile home park community, is that public outreach process and the focus groups and the community is kind of reinforced. And what we've heard at subsequent rules committee is how different these processes are. And so it's important to maintain them, as we've said that. And I think, so that's why I think in terms of how you say, like to merge them as one, they are very distinct sets of rules and requirements, which is why in the state of California, they reserve the right to oversee the conditions of mobile home parks, like forever, it seems, since I've been doing this forever. So I think it's important to understand there is that, and that's something that definitely came out in the public process. We initially thought as staff, maybe it could be something 2 years ago, you just kind of roll in. I mean, one thing I would say is that there would be some uniformity of staff overseeing it, but I think the actual regulatory process is two distinct things. And that's what we tried to emphasize here.
Okay. My second question has to do with the timeline. Is that a concurrent timeline or is it a stacked timeline?
Yeah, I think it's, you could say stacked, it's individual. It's not like, it's not like, oh, if you do 3, it's like 3 for the price of 1 kind of thing, So they're, like I said, each of these topics, and, even if you look at Alameda County recently, they've just focused on a couple of things for several years. These, I'm not saying that would take that, but these can be individually, we could just dive pretty deep into each of these as a policy issue, so.
So just to tease that out, if the council were to prioritize rent stabilization, and then number 2 would be, I don't know, tenant anti-harassment, we wouldn't, what is being suggested or what is being proposed based on this is that you won't be able to start the next policy until the first one is completed?
I think that for that type of, we would, I think, I couldn't answer for you tonight and probably talk, seeing our city manager too. This is part of our next steps once we get the direction of ideally the 1 or the, so we would come back and then figure out that timeline.
Got it.
Yeah. So.
My third question has to do with enforcement. We touched a little bit about, but section 4.45.140 of the actual ordinance, actually not, it's part of the Muni code, not, anyway, I'm getting too deep in that. So in terms of enforcement, I'm looking specifically section 140 and violations. What I'm hearing here is that we're going with a voluntary compliance model. Because the violation just says that you'll get a fine if you don't register your unit, but there's no actual proactive enforcement in the Muni code.
Well, so again, back to the staffing level and the budget. No, there would be, I mean, it would be part of the ongoing monitoring.
Okay.
And so this would be enforceable if people aren't registering and paying their fee. Again, I think we were just cautioning that that would take time. That kind of work every year as you try to ramp it up is to see who's not doing that and then making a better effort, maybe outreach or whatever each year.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I have one more question. So there's the fee is kind of to be modulated depending on kind of, anyway, the rent registry fee is still TBD with a cap of 100 per unit. In terms of moving forward with rent stabilization in order to enforce and monitor that program, would there be an additional fee or would that be part of the rent registry fee?
Yeah, so I think that gets into just same with timeline too, is like over time we would, once we got that direction, would figure out like how do we efficiently utilize staff, and what would be the right number of staffing to do both rent stabilization and rent registry.
Okay,
So-
I have more questions, but my time's up, so I'll defer to my colleague.
We'll come back to you. Councilmember Simon, please.
A question for you on the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance. And I was looking through some information and some public comments that came through. The 2023 to 31 housing element commitment. Evaluate and update the ordinance by January 2026. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I think I might have even said January 2025, I think, from the comment, right? So yeah, I can. So again, the housing element is a very important document that housing staff, planning staff, a lot of our staff are working on. That was actually, that goal and objective was written probably in 2022, as we were getting ready to formalize and get our housing element adopted. So as you know, the housing element, just like the general plan, has a very large document with many policy objectives and goals. So there are times when we are not going to be as timely on every one, and we actually have to report that out every year to the state. So just an example, if that's one where we know that in the last year or so, staff has been trying to provide the Rules Committee in particular with more information and data to analyze and look at. So obviously that deadline is going to move.
Are there other deadlines that we're moving that we've made commitments to?
Again, it's a plan. So we are achieving a lot of them, but at the same time, there are ones, again, you get this report, you'll probably get it in front of you, and it gets posted publicly in the spring of every year. So we monitor and report on how we're doing on the housing element. So, so realistically, there are so many in there, so many policies and goals and objectives. So we're on target for many, but then some we have to sometimes just,
Regarding rent control or rent stabilization, just cause or tenant anti-harassment, did we have goals or timelines when we would implement these as well?
Actually, the housing element, I have to look in there because it mentions mobile home, but there actually is no, I think it broadly more talks about housing protections. I don't believe there is a specific policy for rent control or rent stabilization in there as a goal, as I recall. So, but again, we know protections is a priority, which council has addressed the last couple of years. So,
And I see that you've lifted options here, but council was interested in doing just more than one, and I understand staff, you have a limitation in staffing. But from a consultant support standpoint, can you hire more consultants to help you handle the workload such that you could handle some of these simultaneously?
again, I don't know if it's, part of it is, there is sort of internal knowledge of the workings here. I don't think it's just a matter of, these things just will take time. I mean, we still have to manage consultants also sometimes require management as well. So it's still staff time to oversee that process, as well. So I don't think it's just a matter of always just bringing in a third party necessarily. And a third party sometimes would require more education of what we've been through the last year and a half as well. So, I mean, yeah, so we are going to utilize some, and they're certainly going to supplement our efforts. So.
Coming to Councilmember Bolt.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate your presentation. The $100 per door estimate, the high estimate on it, just going back to what my colleague, Councilmember Azevedo said, we could get to 2 million if everybody was participating. And if that was true, then we'd have more. But I think in the beginning, we'd have to use a lot of money on education, just getting out there and talking to some of the landlords that aren't aware, and also residents, making sure that there's, buy-in on both ends of that. So even if it was a lot in the beginning, it would be used. It's not like it would just go back to the budget, in my opinion. I think we'd see an increase in business licenses through this as well, because there's a lot of landlords who are renting without paying that. So that's an additional plus for us. But I guess the one question I really do have is I know we're separating out the mobile homes, but when we're talking about this rent registry, it seems to me they would be involved in this and they're not separate from the process. Is that correct?
In terms of the rent registry part?
Right.
So again, I would kind of go back to what we were saying. So they actually have what's called a rent roll, which functions like a rent registry. And I think it's important to note that we actually have spent, as a council and a community, a lot of effort the last 5 or 6 years on the mobile home. To create the ordinance, we actually created zoning changes that I think you saw on the Planning Commission to protect against conversion of mobile home parks into other uses. And so I think there is an enforceable program in place already that has a process for the residents as well as park owners to get a return that they can currently utilize. So that's why we were saying, in terms of a distinction, trying not to merge the two issues.
So we would not merge them.
We were saying that's why we don't need, we shouldn't, because they already have a process that in some ways other renters do not. It's already been in place.
So with that there, how much on average, what do they pay per door?
The rent registry?
Yeah, if we already have this policy being.
Well, that's actually a good question, because part of that was in the desire to get something adopted. We have not actually established that fee until, I think this is the first time in your budget, 2-year budget, there may be a fee for the rent mobile home parks. So since 2020, when the program took effect, it was adopted in 2019, we've learned too, we've been utilizing existing staff to basically administer that program. And so learning from that experience going forward now, to mention to the council that if we are to expand our efforts for tenant protections and for effectiveness purposes, probably will need to go beyond the existing housing staff that's there.
That's there. Okay.
Right.
So it
So-
would end up in some ways merging though. Because
Well,
if you're
in terms
gonna
of
start-
oversight, but in
Right.
terms of actually the regulations overseeing mobile home parks and the regular rental market, they're distinctive processes
Process.
and
Okay.
requirements and conditions, and so.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I want to ask a couple of questions. I know you've got a lot of things on your plate. We're pursuing grants for affordable housing and the like. We've got some units that are entitled that we're just out there scrappy looking for money, right? So I'm trying to understand, just hypothetically speaking, we said, we get it, you're busy, but we want you to do 2 of these. We know that you have to give up something. You'll have less time and energy to pursue something. So what are some of the things that you would give up that you wouldn't be able to pursue? Would it be certain grants, certain funding? Like what? Help us understand.
Yeah, I think that's one way. You know, I would frame what the housing, community development housing staff does in a broad way. They really are sort of working and juggling many things. So I think of it on the policy side, on the program services side, they're administering existing programs that we've listed here too, and the monitoring reporting side. And what I would say is that monitoring reporting side, anything that comes with federal or state money has a lot of strings attached. That is probably 40 to 50% of staff's job, if not more. Those are mandated requirements that we have to work, and that's what we excel in, and they have expertise on as staff. So to your point, Mayor, I think, again, we'd have to look at the housing element and further as we look at some of the future grant funding as well, because I can let you know that now that we're deep in the Nimitz Llewellyn project, there's still a lot of strings attached to that home key. It's been a wonderful blessing, but it's really impacted a lot of the staff, both housing and human services, to follow up the reporting, follow up requirements. So it's one of those things where hard for me to say right now but I think exactly to your point that if we have multiple things layered on, it could potentially impact some other priorities, including one of the current priorities for council and under housing homelessness is an increased housing supply too. So where if housing staff is getting pulled into more deeper involvement on areas of this protection policies, then we'd have to see, can they also juggle some of that other part of your housing homeless priority to increase housing supply?
I'm assuming that non-compliance with our grants would be a bad thing.
Yes, especially with HUD and
with HUD.
CDBG, yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit about kind of what are those consequences of non-compliance?
From a HUD standpoint, it's, potentially you could be asked to pay back funds, could be defunded in the future. And I know some of you who do work in the public, I know Councilmember Viveros Walton can attest to this, is sometimes just to get back into compliance is a pound of flesh, so to speak, of staff, just to get us back on the right track. It's a lot of time and effort through a lot of hoops that are very specific and detailed. So,
So talking about compliance and enforcement, I'm trying to figure out why it would take 3 to 5 years for compliance to happen. I get that was like Alameda's experience. I seem to recall reading some public online documentation about that. But do we know the why? Because it strikes me that if we've got fines and penalties, and I'll explore fines and penalties in a second, but if we've got, let's say, an incentive for them to comply, what are some of the practical considerations on why it takes so long?
Yeah, I think Councilmember Bolt had a really good example. So learning from, say, Alameda, was the outreach. I mean, just to pass a law and assuming everybody will follow it is not a guarantee. So what I've seen or understood through the city of Alameda is every year they have ramped up their outreach. Now they actually have at least 2 or 3 required sort of education meetings that they make available, or more. They really, I live in Alameda, so I see this. They advertise the heck out of it. So I think they've realized we got to make sure everybody understands what we're doing to get full compliance. Maybe a lot of people don't get it. It could be sometimes language barrier. It could just be not following the news cycles. So that was one area where we saw that they have really ramped up every year, and sending reminders more constantly to property owners as well to say, hey, by the way, we have this law. I didn't know if you realized, but there's penalties. So, and then following up with those letters.
So 2 other questions, and one might be quick. Do we have fines and penalties? I didn't notice it in what I read.
It's mentioned here, as I don't know if Alex wants to speak on that part, or if Rich has
There are fines. The ordinance section 140 references chapter 112 where our fines are contained.
Do we need to amend that, or we can just?
We can do it
administratively
as is. In the ordinance, the draft ordinance is clear that every day you don't turn it in is a new violation. So
Yeah, but the actual fine, is that $10? Is that $100 or?
I believe our schedule is $100 for the first violation, $300 for the second, and $500 for the third.
Perfect. And my last question to city attorney. I know that there's sensitivity around any sort of database where you're collecting private information. Would we be required to share that either with the public or the state of California, federal government, once we compile this data?
So the registration statement, which is in section 4-45-120B, includes but not limited to site address, assessor parcel number, date purchased by current owner, year built, type of rental housing, et cetera. The names, business addresses, business telephone numbers of each person or legal entity possessing an ownership interest in the rental unit, the nature of such interest, and it goes on. This would all be a public record. So the compilation would be a public record, of course.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I think what we're going to do, I'm going to look to the public because I know you guys have been waiting and you want to speak, but we also have bio breaks. So I'm going to look to the council for guidance on this one. Do you want to take your break now and then just kind of push through, or do you want to take 15, 20 minutes of public comment and then take a break, because we will need to take a break.
Yeah, I would like to prioritize public comment. I don't know if my colleagues are.
Okay, so then what we'll do is we're going to set a timer. We're going to take 20 minutes of public comment so that we can actually take a bio break at some point here. And then we'll come back. We'll take our break and then we'll come back. So if it's really important for those that really need to, let's leave, right? You got to leave. Please, let's try to take those people first so that they can get out of here and don't have to wait until 10 o'clock. We're going to start in person.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have 9 public comments in person and 3 online. Emily Rich.
Hi. I'm Emily Rich, and I'm a 25-year resident of San Leandro. I was a renter in San Francisco for 25 years before I moved here, and our son is now a renter in San Francisco with 3 roommates. I don't envy the council's task tonight, deciding what vulnerable group to protect and which to leave to the mercy of the capitalist status quo is an unfortunate dilemma. But both residential tenants and mobile home owners need increased legislative protections in San Leandro. If it were my choice, I would choose rent stabilization and just cause provisions for the 20,000 rental units and perhaps 40,000 renters in San Leandro who are living under the state rent cap of up to 10% annually, which our state will probably reach again this year due to our federal government's economy disrupting machinations. But the worst thing that could come out of tonight's meeting would be no direction to staff to draft something. Although I know it is hard to reach consensus on what levels of protection to enact, it is not hard to get a draft ordinance together. We have Berkeley, Oakland, Hayward, Richmond, Alameda, Salinas, and Mountain View, to name a few. We also have the complete draft ordinance the Big Tent, San Leandro, has provided the city. These ordinances have been enacted, litigated, and approved. There is essentially a California state template if you look to all the successful housing ordinances in the state. I beg you to direct staff to take the next necessary steps to implement the rental registry and draft further protections for our vulnerable renters. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob Rich.
Hi, I'm Rob Rich. I'm lucky enough to live here in San Leandro. I'm excited tonight. I'm excited to support the rent registry before you tonight, though I'm a bit surprised by its estimated cost. And I'm absolutely gobsmacked by how long it's taken us to get to this point. I'm excited that you have the opportunity to give staff direction tonight, although it feels a little bit like Sophie's choice. All options presented by staff are critically important. And of course, we need adequate staffing to perform this work. I want to give a shout out to our mobile home park residents. Thanks to their activism, expertise, and dedication, we have a mobile home park rent stabilization ordinance with a registry. No doubt it's imperfect. Let's shine a light on the capital improvement pass-throughs. We're hearing that they are being used for massive rent increases at mobile home parks. What are the limits on our current tools? Hopefully, our existing ordinance needs more of a tune-up and a complete overhaul. I'm excited that you are poised to throw the net even wider by extending local protections to more tenants and applying those lessons learned. Staff estimates 7 to 12 months for rent stabilization. Let's get it done this year with Just Cause close on its heels. I'm excited that you are uniquely prepared for this. Some council members have been voting to prioritize these issues for years. All council members have voiced support in your campaigns and in these chambers. I'm excited that tonight is showtime. Let's go. Please give staff the resources they need to begin work on local rent stabilization ordinance with just cause protections and on reforming the pass-through loophole in the mobile home park residence ordinance.
Thank you. Greg Williams, then Cheryl Nolden.
And if the second speaker could line up, just so we want to get through this as quickly as possible.
Thank you. My comments are that most tenants, or high percentage of tenants in San Leandro, live in paycheck to paycheck. 60% of Americans live in paycheck to paycheck. And for renters, that number is even higher. So when we look at rent stabilization, it's something that is essential for our residents. Also, in terms of just cause, the United States is one of the only countries in the world where we don't have universal just cause. In most other countries, they have it in the workplace as well as where people live. And they look at us and they say, ooh, you know, what a cruel country we have that we don't have just cause. So, you know, those are my two biggest concerns. In terms of the rent registry, we should include this paycheck to paycheck information. We should find out information in terms of what our tenants are paying for rent, you know, what their cost of living is. Include that within the registry. And, you know, hopefully we can move on this issue as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Nolden, Evelyn Oliveira, and then Ginny Madsen.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I was a little taken aback by some of the comments that were spoken about the registry. I'm not familiar with a lot of these things, but 7 to 12 months for mobile homes. I thought, really? Seems like a long time. And I was wondering, when will the action begin? And I also was not under the impression that the MHRSO already had a registry. That's kind of like news to me. But actually, from the presentation, it just felt to me like this was a city council's first stab at rent control. I just felt like there's still so many questions and still so many things to do. But tonight, I'm here to speak on behalf of the seniors that live in Mission Bay Mobile Home Park. The seniors were 75 and older. These are people who purchased and now live in a place where they felt they would be in a safe community that cares about them. These people do not have options to increase their income. So when their total income in most cases is Social Security, and there aren't yearly costs of living increases, but there are yearly increases in rent, the equation just is a disaster for the homeowners, for the senior mobile homeowner. For the city to allow a corporation to use seniors as a cash cow, and that's really how I kind of feel like it. We don't have anything really in place to stop that from happening. It's unforgiving. I'd like for Mayor Gonzalez and the council members to reflect on how you, the city council, not coming to the agreement on critical updates to the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance
Thank you. Your time is up.
will have a severe negative.
Evelyn Oliveira, Jenny Madsen, and then Derek Barnes.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Evelyn Oliveira. I'm a Rent Review Board tenant representative and resident and renter in San Leandro since 1996. This is my new hometown. I am here once again to advocate for my fellow renters in San Leandro. While I appreciate the first reading of the rental registry being added to the existing ordinance, I hope this is just the beginning the beginning of some positive forward momentum to implement further protections to all renters, including mobile home owners. There's still much work to be done to continue, and I will continue to advocate for rent control here in San Leandro, specifically 3% plus CPI not to exceed 6% within a 12-month period. This would allow our neighbors to get on more tenable footing to further support their families and live and play in San Leandro, thereby enabling the whole community to thrive. I am a government employee, formerly San Leandro for 11 years, now Hayward for 6 years with Housing and Community Services. I have a little experience. My budget, I make more than the average person here in San Leandro, and I struggle check to check. 45% of my income goes to rent, and I charge my 21-year-old son rent. He's failing to launch because he cannot. While I love him and he's a great roommate, thank you, Jesus, he wants to get out, and I don't blame him. I'd like him to go out too. Please, even if there's a sunset on this 3% plus CPI as a compromise to help everybody involved, I think we need to open that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny Madsen, Derek Barnes, and then Douglas Spalding.
I am not doing well, as you can tell from the look on my face. My name is Jenny Madsen. I've come before you so many times on this subject. The rent registry is for San Leandro. The city needs to know how many of its housing units are being rented. It's important for the city. But You know I'm asking for tenant protections. If you ask me what the top priority is, I think it is, I say rent stabilization because I was told years ago that nobody in San Leandro will ever vote for rent control. We need to put a cap on rent increases. Every tenant in San Leandro knows that this is what makes the biggest difference the soonest. All of these other things, they need enforcement. They have to come eventually, but that is the one that if I had to lay down my life, I would do it for that. I also feel compelled to say that owning property for investment does not contribute to the economic engine of San Leandro. But women hold up half the sky and renters hold up half the economic input in the city. Renters are 40%. Who buys anything in here? Who pays sales tax? It is not the people who own property here and take that money home to wherever they live. And that I feel really strongly about. In honor of Women's Month, women hold up half the sky, but renters hold up half the economy here. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek Barnes, Douglas Spalding, and Mark Janowitz.
Good evening again, Mayor and City Council member and staff. I'm Derek Barnes with East Bay Rental Housing Association. I always start with what is the problem? The problem is that we need more affordable housing units. We need to produce more. I urge you not to adopt the proposed housing protections. While I respect and appreciate the intent and support of tenants, the unintended consequences of this policy could undermine the very housing stability that we are all seeking. We've seen similar ordinances rush through in neighboring cities like Oakland and Richmond and Concord. While well-meaning, these policies have contributed to increased housing costs, reduced rental availability, and a chilling effect on small mom and pops, many of whom live here in San Leandro. Property owners leaving the market, reducing the already limited rental stock, and pushing small owner operators really out of the business. Housing starts in some of those, the aforementioned cities have really fallen off the cliff because of the economy, because of some of the policies. I like Council Member Walton's idea of looking at ways to fund rental assistance. I think that's a way to go because we know that over 90% of the unlawful detainers in Alameda County are due to non-payment of rent. I think that's a serious problem, along with some additional funding for repair and rehab of some of our smaller owner-operator units. We're also, EBRA has been working with the county for the better part of 8 months, looking at ways to deal with rent registry. I think someone else brought this up, looking at ways to make business licenses required, and then adding some additional pieces of information that may be useful for knowing what's going on in the rental market. These kind of modifications make a lot of sense, and I would have you pause to take a look at some of the other ideas that some cities.
Your time is up. Douglas Spalding, and then Mark Janowitz is the last in-person.
That's a tough act to follow. Wish I could get paid for my appearances here. Mr. Lau, I have a couple questions here. It's so chock full much of information, but I was left with a few questions. One is, I was trying to understand, like, for example, Building Futures, what is the exemption for them? Is that like a transient, are they kind of a transient housing thing? I don't think you answered Councilmember Bolt's question about what the cost of the mobile home rent roll is. So that would be interesting to know. And I'm still unclear, the 2 additional FTEs, is that to bring you
I'm
up?
going to ask you to hold for just a second. It is our protocol to have you address the council because we are the people that
I'm sorry.
get to direct. No disrespect, right? I know you always are here and you ask really good questions. I don't want to cause you any problems. I'm going to give you a little bit more time just to be mindful of the interruption. But if you could please direct to council.
I appreciate the correction. So is that to bring us up to a full staff of 4, or would that make the staff 6? As an aside, I would say as a person who owns a home and rents a room and will be renting another room when my son goes off to college, You know, the $100 fee seems very reasonable. And I would think that my renters would also be happy to pay half of that. And I was very interested in the surplus, Councilmember Azevedo, because it seems like there's a lot we could do with that. Like maybe we could get even more housing staff to help us. And I have another idea for that. You know, it just seems like if I added up the months right, it's taken 2 years to get to this point, and we're talking another 3.5 years at the earliest for this to be implemented. We can't, right? We can't wait like another year after this for rent stabilization. The question isn't what does the housing department give up? The need is for us to build up the capacity of the housing department, whether that's more staff, also working smarter. It seems like we should know stuff from the rent roll already. You know, like we don't have to reinvent the wheel to do this. So can we get it going? I would say the one thing I want is housing protections, all of it, because each of the components reinforces the others to make it a whole. And that's really what we need.
Thank you. Your time is up. Mr. Mayor, Mark Janowitz is the last public speaker. We have one more.
Do we have any online?
We do. We have 6 hands up online.
Okay, so we're going to take our break when in person is done. Janowitz, Mr. Janowitz, and somebody else?
Tuan and Evelyn. 2 more.
2 more. Okay, so we're going to take those 3. Then we're going to take our break. No extra cards come up. You do get to speak, but at some point we have to say we're going to take a break. Mr. Janowitz, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Director Leal, for the presentation. You all have a hard job to do, not just on this, but the other myriad other issues, complicated stuff. Wow. But I have confidence that you all can do it. And that confidence extends to your ability to enact the entire package at one time. As my fellow worker says, you're not inventing the wheel. You're not reinventing the wheel. In fact, it would be a foolish waste of time if you didn't look at ordinances that exist from other cities. By this time, we are blessed in this time and space that these ordinances exist around the state. They've been tested over and over again in the courts, as I know all too well, and they have succeeded and survived those tests. I want to read to you from the California Supreme Court to tell you what they think of the importance of these packages of ordinances that go together, the just cause and the rent stabilization. And it is rent stabilization, absolutely. The reading of the California Supreme Court, as reiterated by numerous other courts, the statutory remedy for recovery of possession, state statutory remedies, does not preclude limitations on grounds for eviction for the purpose of enforcing a local rent control regulation. The court noted that typically rent control legislation includes eviction controls that require good cause in order for a landlord to bring an eviction action. Without such controls, the security of tenure objectives of rent control laws could be undermined, and the threat of eviction could be used to nullify the operation of rent regulations. They all go together. It's complicated, but you don't have to go that far. You can just look at other jurisdictions and see what they've done and adopt them. It's not that hard. Even the ordinances from bigger cities and smaller cities are really kind of similar. And there's many that will fit this town. We are ready to work with you to do it.
Up. Tuan, and then Evelyn will be the last public speaker in person.
I think the Bay Area has the most rent regulations across the country, and yet it is the least affordable. And we've passed all these regulations and it makes things worse, and it never really addresses the underlying root causes of why things are so unaffordable, why there's less housing than we need. An example of regulation that doesn't really help the people that need help the most is actually this. It is similar to what California did at the state level. We spent $24 billion on homelessness over 5 years. That amounts to $160,000 per homeless person. What happened to that money in the last 5 years? Nobody could really account for it. Most of it went to bureaucracy and pushing red tape. The rent registry is similar in that you need outreach, you're collecting data, a lot of pushing, a lot of red tape and bureaucracy and administration, and it's up to $2 million for the 20,000 units at $100 a pop, and that money, if you applied it, last time I was in the Rules Committee, it was about 26 people that were getting eviction notices. If you apply the 2 million to the people who need the help the most directly, that would be $80,000 that you could give to the people who need the most. And here there are other solutions like looking at the licensing for business tax and adding to that. The other thing is that unpermitted units that could not be registered. It's known that single-family homes, about 10 to 20% have unpermitted units. We needed housing for decades. We have NIMBY policy. So people convert garages, basements, backyards. So those units are known to rent below market rate to about 2 to 3 person per unit. And in San Leandro, that could be 10,000 people that, what are you going to do if it's not registered? Are you going to lose those units? What happens to that? And then the collection of...
Thank you. Your time is up. Evelyn?
Ms. Evelyn, I'm a long-time San Angelo resident, and my kids are growing up here. And well, right now, the restriction for the owner, which is not fair to us, because I never heard anything about, has to be disciplined to the tenants. I have a real bad tenants that they owns me about more than $100,000 for the rent, but I don't have any help. I'm looking for anyone and county, state, county and state and city councilors. They couldn't find any agency to help me with a low income also, and senior and low income. So, I've been punished. And when I try to have an advertisement for my rental, and because my rent is, I charge a rent very low, resident ask for why, what's wrong with your property? So, if I don't increase their rent, they still complain. I ask for lower rent. They just wondering what's wrong with my properties. So, I don't have that many choice. I'm only thinking about, back out to the rental market. Because I don't want to deal with, as a seniors, I don't want to deal with all those headaches. And now, the registration or whatever, because, sorry for my English, because I don't grow up here. I don't have an education here. I don't have a degree in China also. But I never meet meet the medium income for my family. So you can tell people saying that paycheck by paycheck. My paycheck is very low. But the affordable housing, which is allow the tenants to pay half their income. Because I'm familiar with the programs. And also San Francisco has the most restriction of the, for the landlords. But they have a terrible, the management of the San Francisco is one of the worst in the Bay Area. So it doesn't help.
Your time is up.
It doesn't help.
Mr. Mayor, there is no more public comment in person.
So at this point in time, we're going to take a brief recess to take our bio break. Then we will come back and listen to our public comments online. 10 minutes, please. Okay, we are back in session. We will begin with we will continue with online public comment. Please proceed, Ms. Clancy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will start with Raina.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. During the presentation, the data category slide included that the registry data collected would include all other information required by the
Hold on
program.
just a second.
Please hold, Raina.
We've got a public commenter. There should be no other conversations happening in this room. We should be listening to our public commenter. You're welcome to step outside and converse. Thank you. I'm going to let you just start your public comment over.
Okay.
You could begin. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. During the presentation, the data category slide included that the registry data collected would include all other information required by the program administrator. I just wanted to flag for the mayor and the council members to be mindful that if data collected includes the names of tenants, there could be survivors of domestic violence whose personal safety and security could be put in danger if their address is posted publicly on a registry or subject to public records requests. So I just wanted to flag that so you're mindful of it when you're collecting personal data. And I do want to agree with other members who have made public comments about if there should be a cap on how much rent should be increased, and that is something that the council should be looking into as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolina, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Gonzalez and council members. There are 2 housing providers on this connection, and I'm hoping that we can each get 2 minutes. Is that okay?
You should just punch in separately. If there are 2 different people going to speak, that's fine, but you need to notice separately.
Okay.
So
Okay.
just want to think about the logistics here. Just give me just a second, please.
Okay.
Okay, well, what we're going to do here, just as a matter of practicality, we're going to let your time run for 2 minutes. Then the second individual who is with you should, in turn, come to whatever, if you're on a computer or phone or whatever, announce, and then we'll begin the timing for that individual.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I was listening to the data that were going on. As I mentioned, I'm a rental provider of a small unit. I'm part of the population in San Leandro that is a homeowner population. If we say that renters are 40% of the population in San Leandro, homeowners make up 58% of the population of San Leandro, which means single family homes most of the time. 2% of the population are then larger corporations that have this as a real business. I'm wondering if in all of this layout for rent stabilization, you're actually forgetting who you're servicing. Half of your population are renters, but the other half, very small mom pop, single individuals, couples married, trying to make ends meet, are your rental providers. So I'm hearing all this rent control going on, but I believe you're not servicing 50% of your population that are homeowners, 58% of the population that are homeowners. While I do agree with some rent control, I also know that having my renter next to me is very personal. I don't want to have just cause applied to my unit while I'm sharing a wall with somebody. And I think we're forgetting that. And the last thing that I'm thinking, if this registry, what we need to do is incentivize more people to build more housing. What we need to do with some of this registry money is perhaps consider how we're going to incentivize homeowners to make more ADU units, more rental units, by perhaps subsidizing for the low income elderly people to have the ability to rent.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Oh, hello?
Hello.
Hi, I'm the second person.
Okay.
So
You
my
may
name is Joe
proceed.
Stevenson, and I have properties in the various areas. And I can tell you from listening to this conversation, I felt like it's very one-sided. I heard a lot of rent control. I heard a lot of renter protection. And my thing is this: we already have some of the most strict and extensive housing protection in the country. It's not helping us. And this rental registry, I feel the main purpose of it is to drive data collection to help us make better decisions. Well, we can do that with third-party software apps that cost like $49 a month. Investors use them all the time, and they're very extensive. They have a lot of information on every single city. We don't have to recreate the wheel and spend $650,000 on what investors spend $49 to do. So that's just one thing. If all we want is data to make better decisions, we could take the data from LoopNet for $49, put it in ChatGPT, and ask them to give us best known methods for dealing with affordable housing issues, and you'll be very surprised at some of the information you'll get. You'll get a whole report, and it'll be unbiased. And that's the thing. Right now, we're not speaking in the middle. It seems like it's a very energized conversation. So when I hear about rent control, the thing I don't hear is cost control. Why is the rent so high? The rent is high because everything is expensive. Utility, insurance, water, taxes, everything related to housing is super high. So there's no way to give anyone a break because you wouldn't be able to pay for it all. So an idea I have is cost control. If we can find a way to do cost control and help stabilize the cost of housing, then we could bring the housing down. And if we could do that, we could build more housing and fix this problem once and for all.
Thank you. Your time is up. Lucas, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my comment. I have a few small notes about the ordinance itself and then some larger notes about what's happening here. So the first one is the requirement for reporting is no later than January 31st of each year. Please extend that to April 15. Most people don't think about what they have to do and report to the government until tax time comes around. We should give people at least as much to report these rent things as they have to pay their taxes. The second one is that the ordinance ignores or excludes rental units that are rented or leased to transient guests for 30 days or less, which I think is a mistake because it makes the city blind to Airbnbs and short-term rentals, which are much better at forecasting the direction in which rent is going than contracts, rental lease agreements, which can be frozen for a year or 2 years. Also, by excluding Airbnbs and short-term rentals from this reporting requirements, you're incentivizing landlords who want to avoid these onerous reporting requirements to shift to monthly rental agreements and avoid this ordinance, which I think will hurt renters in the long term. Next is the cost of the program, which I think is excessive compared to the benefit. $650,000. You know how I feel about costs. It's just additional layers of bureaucracy for landlords and the city government. We're raising $100 per 20,000 units. That's $2 million. Feature? I'm not sure. But it looks like it. There's no discussion of privacy or security. You're compiling a list of landlord names, contact information, residences, large landowners in the city. It's painting a target on their back. Communist Russia, Communist China had lists of capitalist elites and the landowning class, and we know how it ended there. The only way to enable more rent is incentivizing construction. Do that.
Thank you. Deborah Acosta, you may unmute yourself.
Yes, I am here. Hold on, let me. Good evening, Mayor Gonzalez, Vice Mayor Bowen, and council members. I'm Deborah Acosta, calling from Portland, Oregon, with you already having heard from my neighbor, Cheryl Nolden, appearing in person, representing the senior community at Mission Bay. Maria, not her real name, is my neighbor, 86 years old and has lived in Mission Bay for 46 years. She and her partner rely on Social Security checks to survive. Recently, she called me in distress. Her partner had surgery, losing all the toes on one foot. He needs his children to care for him, but if he moves out, Maria's $1,900 check will certainly cover her $1,500 rent and utility bill. Then she'll have $400 left to survive the month. Many of our neighbors face impossible choices: seniors, disabled residents, and those with mental health struggles. We sent you survey data earlier today providing evidence this crisis is real. Yet, 4 years after first raising these concerns, we are still waiting for protections while the 2019 mobile home RSO harms us. And here we sit, late into the night, struggling to stay awake just to plead for fairness for our neighbors who cannot be here tonight. Mission Bay, Trailer Haven, Salelles, Bayshore Commons, all of us. This council committed to revising the mobile home RSO and the 2023 housing element, a fixed timeline you approved. We will present staff a revised RSO within the next 30 days. It will not require 7 months to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. San Leandro Chamber, you may unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, everybody. This is Emily Grego, President and CEO of the San Leandro Chamber of Commerce. I'm here tonight to share some of our thoughts, the Chamber of Commerce thoughts regarding the proposed rental stabilization policies and their impact on San Leandro's economic future. We recognize the importance of housing stability. We must ensure that new policies do not unintentionally hinder housing development, limit economic diversity, or discourage local investment. Small businesses, restaurants, and retail shops rely on residents to spend locally. The more people we have participating in the local economy, more sales tax is generated to fund essential city services, from public safety to infrastructure to parks and recreation. We value good governance. We believe that the state of California already has stronger renter protections in AB 1482, and additional local policies risk being redundant and burdensome. Also, enforcement is unclear. If past city ordinances lack clear enforcement, how will this be managed effectively? We believe housing is an economic driver. If San Leandro is perceived as unfriendly to new housing, fewer units will be built, limiting options for residents. Economic stability. Businesses need residents to live and spend in San Leandro. The Chamber represents developers and property owners, but we also advocate for all of the small businesses that rely on a stable local economy. We need thoughtful, balanced approaches to protect renters while still making it viable for new housing to be built. Otherwise, we defeat the very purpose of ensuring housing accessibility in San Leandro. We support housing solutions, economic growth, and a thriving business community. We urge you to take a balanced approach that encourages housing investment while maintaining affordability. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Bulatow, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for listening to me, City Council and Mayor. More than half of San Leandro is making less than $100,000 a year. When we look at the amount of renters out here, I think last I read, it was about 44%. We are pricing out a lot of these people. We have to consider the fact that a majority of these families are low income. 8 of our 12 schools are Title I schools, and the rest are just on the verge of Title I. We are displacing many families. And for what? For the profit of real estate? Yes, it's okay for them to want to make a return on their investment. But if it's coming at the cost of our residents, then we're not serving them. We're hurting more people than we are helping by ignoring the fact that rent is just ridiculous everywhere in California, but we have the opportunity to do something about it here. So I plead, listen and take these steps in order to provide that proper rent control that we need. There is no reason any cost of living should go up 10% year after year after year. That just leads to more displacement, more gentrification. We're building the city for the people that we want to replace it with, not for the people that live here, not for the people that work here and do their best just to make ends meet. We got to do it. This has been years and years in the making and just been put on the back burner. How many more families are going to be displaced and hurt because of inaction? Please consider making those moves today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, there's no more public comment.
So we'll close public comment and we will come back to council for discussion. I'll begin with Councilmember Viveros Walton.
Thank you. I think just in terms of process, I'm going to throw a motion out. We can start off that way. So one is I would like to move the rental registry. I'd like to make a motion to move the rent registry that would amend San Leandro Municipal Code 4.45 and also direct staff to submit the recommended program fees at the annual budget of $650,000 for budget years 25 through 27. That would be motion number one, but I'm wondering just in terms of process, if I'm able to tack on the next steps, or would staff prefer it to be two separate motions?
I think that as a matter of courtesy to all the council members, that it would be nice to hear how people are thinking about the various choices and have some plus and minus discussion.
So
as opposed to letting one anchor, I think it'd be nice to hear from everybody and then jump in. I'll say, I'll take a motion.
Okay.
Then
it's just almost 10
but I've
PM.
got you as highly interested.
It's just 10 it's almost 10 PM. So. Oh yeah. Do we need a motion to extend?
We will do that in just a second
right.
because I don't want to lose it.
Okay. All right.
Do I have do I have a
Second to move.
So I've got a motion from Councilmember Viveros Walton, the second from Councilmember Bolt, specifically to adopt the staff recommendation to approve the rent registry that's laid out with the adjustments to the administrative code, et cetera. Is that clear? Okay, so we have clarity around that motion and the second. I'm just going to ask a very quick question. Would council be okay voting on that so we can get that out of the way? Or do people feel like we need to discuss that piece, the rent registry, some extensive discussion? I'm just going to point to you, Councilmember Aguilar, if you want to weigh in quickly on that.
I'd like to add a substitute to also include rent stabilization. I know we have rent control on there, but I also like to work on that simultaneously. So we're focusing on one aspect I support. Well, I mean, I like that, but I like to also make sure that we're lining some ducks up in the row so that that this process doesn't take 4 years.
Yeah. So, okay, so I'm going to try to keep this in order and keep it organized. And I appreciate your thoughts. Are you asking for a substitute motion for her motion, or are you expressing that after doing the rent registry, your preference among the priorities that are laid out is to really focus on the rent control piece? So you find doing the registry first and just kind of checking it off and getting it
to work on it
way
concurrently.
Okay, I'm going to ask City Manager. I think she's got a question or thought. I just want to make sure we're communicating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Aguilar. The rent registry piece, because we are at the first reading, is almost done. We're done, unless you want to gut it and then we go back to square one. So there's really no way to work on something else simultaneously to this unless we hold this up and don't bring back the second reading, which I'm not sure that's what anyone's asking for. So the way that this staff recommendation is structured is to be able to have the first reading tonight, come back with the second reading and be done with this. And staff will work on the implementation, but the actual council activity of that will be done. The other step is after that, what would you like us to do? And they don't have to be connected. They can be separate.
And towards that end, okay, go ahead.
Point of clarification. So motion is to support move and support the rental registry. And then we're going to move forward with the second motion.
Second part to discuss, explore that second list.
Let's vote on the motion.
Okay.
Rescind my
Your request. Okay, perfect. And I do think I don't want to shut down the discussion insofar as we might have discussion, hey, $100 seems a little much, or the budget is $650 might be too much. We have a motion that says that's what we're approving. But if there is some discussion there, I do not want to try to stop that dialogue. I'm just trying to segment it, okay? So I'm going to go, who's got a question?
Well, except my whole time was being used in the discussion, so.
I'm sorry.
As I made the motion, so, but I also didn't get to, But it's okay. It's okay. There's a motion on the floor. Let's vote.
There's a motion and a second. And my question is whether there's discussion or clarification. Councilmember Azevedo. Just punch in, please, so we can hear you.
I just wanted to see if she would be okay with the friendly amendment to bring it back after 3 years to check the data and see if we go on with it. I would
have a sunset provision.
Well, I'd like to check the data to see how it's working.
Okay.
It's my understanding that in the ordinance, there's already an annual report that comes back to council.
There is an annual report, but I think he's asking, would you be open to a sunset provision so that it literally has to be reauthorized in 3 years?
I don't know that I'd want to sunset it and reauthorize it because it sets the stage for disruption.
We could just look at it. Yeah. Look at
I think the annual report that we're going to get will get to the questions that you have around data. But I'm really sensitive to the sunset because it'll disrupt it. And I would rather it continue without a sunset date.
And to be clear, a future council has the right to sunset any regulation subject to legal constraints. Other questions on this topic? And again, I've got a really long queue, but I think a lot of it's with respect to the second piece. I'm just trying to handle this piece first, subject to our time. So I'm going to go to Councilmember Simon next on this specific topic.
My comment or questions on the $100 maximum fee. And we'll be talking later about some of these other items like rent stabilization or mobile home ordinance. But can some of this money, this $100 fee, be used to support these other items like rent stabilization or mobile home ordinance?
So I'm going to start with that as a legal question. So I want to make sure that it's legally possible to take money that's kind of, I'll call it a cost of service, and then reallocate it for another purpose. So I'll start with city attorney and you can pass it to your team.
Hold
on just a second. I really would like to have him formally pass it to you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Alex Mogg, Assistant City Attorney, would be able to answer.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember, the fee, whatever it's set at, is used to administer that specific program. So it can't be used to administer other types of programs with different regulations. There might be another fee for something else, but there's no surplus. We have to set the fee at what the city's costs are to implement this specific program.
Other questions on this topic? Vice Mayor, please. You can punch in.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just have a comment about rent registry, and that's fine now. Okay. I really appreciated Tom's comments earlier about the importance of having a rent registry if we were going to be able to monitor and enforce any of the other housing protections that we want to explore. There was a slide up about, why a rent registry was necessary, and we've talked in great length throughout on the council when we were talking about the eviction moratorium and the importance of having information and obviously using correct and accurate and current data to make and craft policy that works for our city. And so I think having a rent registry, especially one that will be self-sustaining, because we will be having a fee structure that will address to be able to run the program and not necessarily have it be passed through to our tenants, which is a big concern. But I really appreciate some of the conversations around data collection. But if we're going to be doing this and doing it correctly, I do think that one of the big purposes is for monitoring and enforcement, and also for transparency. And so I am, the reality is that $650,000 budget would have covered in our recent item, would have covered both the CDBG funds and the roads. So it is a large sum, but I think it serves a important purpose, and it will help us to be able to make better decisions that are going to be more informed.
Are there other questions on this specific item? Just go ahead and punch in, Councilmember Bolt.
Yes. On this specific topic, are we going to be able to discuss like what's being collected? Because someone made a comment that I never thought about, and that was about women, and trying to be secretive about where they're at, and I would hate that we're creating a policy that is going to expose people in that situation.
Yeah, so the short answer to that question, if we need additional legal detail, we can go there, but I asked that very question just a second ago. And it's, we don't need to disclose public information about tenants. We already do redactions with respect to mobile home tenants.
Okay, so then the answer is we would not give out information about who's actually living in the house. We may collect it, but we wouldn't be required to give it out in any public records requests or anything like that.
There's one additional, he said correct,
Okay.
but there's one kind of nuance in the answer. What if the owner, the housing provider, is the subject of former domestic violence?
So there are exemptions that we would apply in that particular instance, as in any other instance where the public interest in withholding the record is outweighed by the privacy interest of the individual. So there is a provision called the catch-all exemption in the Public Records Act where we would apply it in that particular situation. We already apply it in the context of the mobile home space rent stabilization ordinance. We don't release tenant data. It is collected though. You'll notice in the current version of the ordinance, there isn't a provision that tenant data collected, but there is an ability for the regulator, in this case, in the department, to determine this might be information we want to pull. And I would defer to Tom, Community Development Director, to explain more on that, if you wish.
If we needed that at some, we'll cross that bridge. It's not part of the current regulation.
And to be clear, I didn't even think additionally about the ones who own the property. Are we able to also keep that?
So, Tom, if a public records request were made for that information, interestingly, and the individual who is having to register is also someone who might request that protection. I think as part of the program, again, your staff would need to be able to understand that nuance and be able to communicate. It's not a monolithic ordinance. We would be able to work with those who are providing the information. And if there was such a need, we would be able to invoke a particular exemption.
So I'm going to look down council roll because I'm just trying to be efficient here. By head nods, are we in agreement that it is our will that individuals who have a privacy need, that we have a process so that individuals who have that privacy need, such as being survivors of domestic violence, that they be able to, I'll just say, tell the city, I want to keep my information private, and that there would be a process that they could self-disclose that. Because otherwise, we know that property records are public information. So there's already a certain amount of risk. I just don't want to create a bureaucracy significantly above that creates a false sense of security. So that's kind of where I am, that we want to offer those protections. And I'm trying to get that that's our general understanding. I'm going to start with Vice Mayor. Time.
Yes, it's 10 o'clock, so I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting by 30 minutes to 10:30.
Perfect. Do I have a second? Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Please vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes unanimous, 7-0.
Thank you for doing that. So if I just really wanted to, because I think it's very clear from the room what the concern is. And I'm assuming we wouldn't have to change what's come before us, right? That we can just we can work with that. But I've got Councilmember, I believe Acevedo has a question or comment. If you can just punch in so we can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, yeah, if people are protected, even if they're in the witness protection program, whatever their issue is, that they're protected.
Okay, I'm going to come to City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For protections or changes we need to make for the safety of others, we can handle that as a staff at a staff level with administrative policy and policy by the city manager. We don't have to update the ordinance.
Okay, so I think at this point in time, I've got a motion by Councilmember Riveros Walton. I've got a second by Councilmember Bolt to adopt item number 1, the rent registry, with the clarification that we protect confidential information as laid out in the discussion today. Fair enough. That's a really good point. As a clarity, this is the introduction of that. We will have a second reading the next time around. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes unanimous, 7-0.
Okay, so at this point in time, I'd like to go through a discussion, and I don't know that it's really anything having to do with questions. It really is just a little bit of dialogue around this concept of we've got various priorities. We've heard from some different constituency groups. How do we want to prioritize? And I guess I'd ask you for your top 2, because we can argue about, well, this should, we can accordion and whatever, but let's just try to reveal what's most important to us right now so that we can see if we can come to some sort of consensus or generate a motion of guidance that comes out of that. So we'll begin with Councilmember Bolt, I think is your next in queue, or Councilmember Bolt.
Thank you. Yes. I was under the assumption we were picking one, and that for me that was going to be rent control. But I like the idea of adding a second, which would be the mobile home space rent stabilization ordinance. I think these two go hand in hand. I think it would be easier to work on something that is like-minded for our staff. If it's one or the other, then I'm going to rent control, and I'm basing this solely off the fact that the space we live in and time we live in right now, the maximum of 10% when we have vulnerable people in our community living on fixed incomes, and the times that we're in, they are very uncertain of, are they going to get a check in 6 months based on the current administration? And, that's got to be one of the scariest feelings to have. So I wish we could speed that up, but I'm listening to Director Liao, one of the most professional people I've ever worked with. I said this before, and I trust that it's going to take that long if that's what you're laying out. But we need to get this done and done in a hurry so that we can truly put some protections in place around rent control so that it can't continue to go up. I'll stop right there. I think it's clear what we need to do, and I don't need to talk for 3.5 minutes.
Councilmember Riveros Walton, please.
Thank you. I would prioritize rent stabilization and just cause. I think those two have to be together because just cause ensures stable housing, but the expanded rental protections under just cause would essentially protect tenants from arbitrary evictions. And so I think those are two that just kind of in my head, they are they work, they have to be together because if you put in rent stabilization without the protections, and my colleague already talked a little bit about the state protections are not enough. The California Tenant Protection Act is just an example. Without expanded tenant protections, a tenant can be evicted essentially immediate, let's see, at the beginning of the tenancy and not a year later. Local ordinances clarifies the circumstances under which tenants can be evicted. I just really think those two are together. I would prioritize rent stabilization and just cause, and I'm going to just pause the comment so we can get to my rest of my colleagues and hopefully get out of here by 10:30.
Vice Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And theoretically, we were saying we're going to prioritize and focus efforts on. We have given, as a council, said we want to look at all 4 of these. And so your question is, of the top 2, which of the top 2 do we want to prioritize?
And in order, what's your number 1? What's your number 2?
Got it. Okay. If for my top 2, it would be rent stabilization and the mobile home space rent stabilization would be the top 2. And then you're just asking for our prioritization and not questions, comments. That conversation is going to be happening after this, or should I mention that now?
My preference is to get the prioritization.
Got it.
If we
Okay.
can reach consensus,
Got it.
we can maybe move through our agenda and get out of here.
But we're still going to get a chance to give a comment. Otherwise, I'm going to give it right now, Mayor. What I want to add in these conversations, and apologies for one, I have so much respect to Director Tom Leo. I just called him Tom earlier, and I just remember the first question that I asked him when I got to city. And now I'm chatting. Sorry. Okay, fine. I want to mention the most vulnerable in our community, especially in light of conversations around Social Security cuts and all of these, and the reality is, especially seniors who are extremely cost burdened. If in these conversations around and looking into rent stabilization, all of these, if possible, were applicable to look into programs that other cities have enacted in some ways to address seniors who are extremely cost burdened and persons with disabilities. I'm thinking about programs, obviously, from municipalities with much larger general funds like Washington, D.C. and New York City, but they do have programs that are impactful in ensuring that those most vulnerable will be able to stay in their homes. And if we can, at least, again, the direction is to have staff come back and give us as much as comprehensive and robust a potential policy, and just at least have that be part of the conversation, I would really appreciate. And again, the other thing I want to say is, in any of these, we've talked about the time and why does it take 7 months, 12 months. I really, really want to make sure that we are engaging with all stakeholders to be able, and doing that outreach and giving staff time to really come back with as much information as we can. It really needs to be something. I really want to stress the importance that we give staff the time that they need and the resources that they need to be able to come back to us with as much information as possible.
Councilmember Simon, please.
Yeah, my top 2 are rent stabilization or rent control and mobile home space rent stabilization ordinance. And I remember Jenny Madsen speaking on this many, many times. And I always remember the analogy of a senior being able to pay their rent but can't pay the heat. And they're freezing in their house. So it's really important so we can get some type of control on the rent stabilization. But on the same token, I'd like to recognize the mom and pop property owners who just have one unit and they're living paycheck to paycheck. So I think when we look at this, we've got to consider them too. Mobile home ordinance, we heard from Cheryl on that, and I totally agree. And one thing I would like to say is that when we make a commitment to the public, and I know these are just plans and policies, but when we make a commitment that we're going to do something, I really wish that we could do it. And I know some things slip and things happen, but when we tell the community we're going to have something done by a certain date, and then it's going to slip, it's going to slip, then that doesn't look good on us. I know people are relying on us. So I would hope that in future plans, if we make a deliverable, we actually do our best to make it. And as far as ranking it, I would really push to do both. I know you say you can't because of staffing capacity, but bring in consultants. And I know we have to manage a consultant. I got it. But the analogy, this is going to sound really rough, but an analogy is like you're in the hospital and you got a heart problem, you got a liver problem. Well, you can only pick one. We can't. I mean, these are two big issues. We got people in mobile homes, which are totally, I mean, really separate than a renter in an apartment. So I really, really believe we should be doing both and provide the resources to staff to do it. Just provide them the resources. Thank you.
Councilmember Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mayor Gonzalez. Rent control is primarily designed to safeguard tenants and help promote housing security and affordability. I think here with the next steps, there's two options here. We just need to couple them together. We need rent control or rent stabilization and mobile home space rent stabilization coupled together with tenant protections, which are just cause and tenant anti-harassment, in my opinion. But that's what I would like to focus on. I think, you know, with rent stabilization, this is rent control. This is a priority that's been prioritized, but put on the back burner for many, many, many years. You know, I think we need to stop. We need to move forward with rent control. We also need to move forward with mobile home space rent stabilization ordinance, but that's also coupled with tenant protections. So just cause and tenant anti-harassment. And, you know, there's our neighboring cities like Hayward and Mountain View and other cities like Oakland have done this ASAP. And so I just want to make sure that staff has the resources and are able to pump this out. We were able to pump out a ordinance to a moratorium on eviction. That quickly happened because of the process. I just, you know, I want to be sensitive to staff, but I also want to put pressure to make sure that we're able to do this. We create great, robust ordinances, and we have rent control for the community. This is something that, like I said, I've been advocating for many, many years. I think it's time. The time is now, and we need to get this done before the end of the year. Thank you.
So just because I'm keeping a list of how people are prioritizing, do you want me to not write a priority? Because what I heard is all four. But
all four.
If Tom can't, because he has to make sure there's federal compliance and he has to go get grants to help fund homelessness programs, and if he has to pursue private donors, and right, if he has to pick, would you like to be marked down as no preference, or would you like me to mark down like one more than the others?
Rent control and mobile home space rent stabilization.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councilmember Azevedo, if you don't mind. Thank you. Councilmember Azevedo.
Okay, I agree with a lot of the comments my colleagues are making. I think my top two are rent control and mobile home space rent stabilization, because mobile homes are really, they're the most vulnerable in our community. I talk to people at Trailer Haven all the time. Their rent went up from $800 to $1,100 in 1 month. And there's a lot of people struggling out there. Like a lot of the community said, and other people, there's people paycheck to paycheck, a lot of people in San Leandro, and I see them every day. And so those are my top two.
And if we had to prioritize them, which one is first?
Rent control.
And so let me I'll give mine very quickly. I would put the mobile home ordinance first because it's already in place. I think we can tweak it much more quickly. And then my second one would be the rent control. I think among the group, the prioritization places rent control first and mobile home ordinance second. So I'm going to take the opportunity to take a deep breath and make sure that that's, you know, when Director Liao has to make some decisions about how he's spending his time, that's the way that we want that to occur. Rent control first, mobile home second. I guess I didn't say why I said mobile home, because I'm at odds with everybody else. To me, the most vulnerable people live in the trailer parks and in the mobile home parks. That's the elderly. And so you've always heard me over and over and over, I'm about the most vulnerable. So that's why I did that prioritization in particular. But do we have consensus on rent control over mobile homes? I'll start with Vice Mayor. Unless, yeah. Okay, let's go.
Appreciate that. I think I would prioritize rent stabilization only because the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance is already in the books, and from my understanding is that the rent increase has to do with the pass through, which is kind of a cleanup situation. It's not the actual like rent stabilization ordinance itself. That being said,
sorry, I am going to interrupt because I think that is part of the ordinance, the cost pass-through provisions.
but that's the part that needs to get cleaned up, is my understanding. That there's a loophole in there that's what needs to get cleaned up.
That is the issue.
It is part of the ordinance, yeah.
Okay. So
So what I'm saying is the ordinance already exists. And so I would much rather, and it's terrible because it feels like we're pitting communities against each other. And I think our goal is to help people stay in their homes wherever it is that home is, and to provide the environment in which they're able to anticipate increases at a certain rate. That being said, just in terms of the rent stabilization, I think that keeping in mind housing providers and some of their concerns, I would like to include specifically on getting to a range of a reasonable rate of return. And I know that staff has already put in a lot of work into like what is the kind of environment, the economic environment. But I would like to have some sort of an economic analysis specific to the reasonable rate of return in the Bay Area and specific to this particular market. Because I think that's where it gets subjective as to what ought to be, as opposed to what can be bared, whatever that word is. And so I'm sensitive to the housing providers, concern about their ability to keep, habitable units and what that means. So just having some sort of analysis there on the reasonable rate of return. And that includes outreach to both, to all stakeholders, to Vice Mayor Bowen's point. So I'll just leave it at that. Prioritize rent stabilization and thinking about the engagement with the various stakeholders to come to some sort of range of a reasonable rate of return, so that when we make a decision as a body, it's grounded in data and grounded in the experience.
looking at our time and in recognition that I know that there is at least one item 12 that someone feels that it's important to get out there, I'm going to ask if council is willing to forego further commentary, because what we have is we have direction. The request was for direction to go and make rent control, just cause eviction, any of these a priority. we have consensus, I think, around that prioritization. Go off, Tom, Director Liao, do your thing. There's going to be input from the housing groups, the housing providers, from different constituencies of renters. I've made very clear what I'm interested in, focusing on the most disadvantaged, right? We each have different interests and approaches. We will have the opportunity through committees, through individual conversations with Director Liao and the city manager to begin socializing what that looks like. So if council is fine with the direction that we've provided, prioritize rent control, then I'd like to move on if that's okay. No, we're just providing guidance. We have consensus. I don't think we need a motion, do we? No. It's very clear in the room what that guidance is. Yes, sir.
I just want to make it clear that rent control is also rent stabilization, because we've been talking about both.
Yes.
That it's not, we're not focusing on mobile home spent rate stabilization. I mean, although we have the ordinance, we'll focus on that, but we're working on rent control / rent stabilization.
To be perfectly clear for our record, when anybody watches this meeting, we're looking at slide, is that page 19? Looks like it's 19. We're looking at page 19, item number 2, first bullet is what the consensus of council is to recommend and to promote. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to clear my queue. Does anybody object? If you object, raise your hand. Councilmember Simon.
I just want to make one comment or a comment here. The ability to work on more than one thing at a time, I think, is important. And I think for us to be unable to do that is difficult for me to swallow. And I know, Tom, you're stretched thin. I know you do good work. I'm not discounting that at all. But what I've seen in other organizations and other companies, you pull in resources when you got to get something done. You pull them in. And I just don't see us doing that here, which is a concern to me. If the council is saying, I'm hearing other council members saying that at least those top 2, rent control and mobile homes, are very important to get done, I'm hearing that, then staff, let's look at Janelle, staff, let's get it done and find the resources to get it done rather than you just got to pick one. That's my concern. It's really hard for me to swallow that. Really hard. Being a multi-million, how many millions of dollars of budgets that we have, I really feel like we should be able to do more than one thing at a time. That's my comment.
So I know that we've had some discussions about the various things that they're doing. I don't know if city manager, you'd like to weigh in or would you like to pass? Okay. Thank you, Tom, for all that you do. Any others? Okay, so let's close this item out because we've provided our direction for item number 11. Do we have any requests? Seeing none, we'll move to item number 12. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to report? Please queue in. And if I, just for the sake, because I need to think about the time, try to manage it, can everybody, or can we just extend for a little bit, or? Okay. Can we
Motion to
extend
extend to
the
10:45.
Maybe?
Motion to extend to 10:45.
Okay, do I have a second on that motion? I
Second.
have a second from Vice Mayor. Please vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. If we can proceed, and again, if we can just keep an eye on that clock, I'd like to be able to close in honor of somebody with at least 1 minute left. So if you can just please keep an eye on the clock. Going to Vice Mayor, or to Councilmember Azevedo, please.
Okay, yeah, I'll keep this brief. I attended National League of Cities last week in Washington, D.C. I attended several meetings. Some of them were America's Housing Comeback. We learned about partnerships and strategies for economic prosperity. I attended Unlocking Federal Funding, Finding the Keys That Fit Your Community. I attended Streamlining Federal Transportation Partnership, and that was really a good meeting. And a closer look at the new rules for PFAS, lead and copper. So yeah, we have a lot of plastics and stuff going in our water, so it's important that we know about it. And I attended a session with our Vice President, JD Vance there, and he was booed. He told the community, he told all the different council members and mayors there that the reason why we have a housing problem is because of immigrants. And he was booed. And he tried to say it was only one person booing him. No, there was several people booing him. And yeah, so I just want to bring that up. And then I also attended today, my EBDA commission meeting for operation and maintenance. And we discussed the Oro Loma pump station. They have an automatic transfer switch. We just had an upgrade on that. And we talked about the Hayward pump station, about a pump that just got put in there. It had a vibration test and it passed. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bolt, please.
Yes, thank you. I also attended National League of Cities in Washington, D.C. A lot of the same classes that my brother Azevedo, or counterpart counsel in Azevedo attended. Good classes. Keep it short. I did not attend the JD Vance because I was afraid I'd throw an apple at him. So.
Councilmember Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mayor Gonzalez. I too did attend the National League of Cities in DC. I attended various sessions. I led a few meetings. I also attended an offsite meeting with the Victory Fund to honor the new CEO, former State Assembly member Evan Lowe, who was the new director, is looking to work forward with the LGBTQ community. Sadly, I missed watching JD Vance because I was too busy lobbying for federal funds for our fabulous city with our Congresswoman Lateefah Simon. And then I also attended on Thursday, March 16th, the East Bay Association of Realtors 2025 Bay East Real Estate Summit. And I wanted to recognize that I missed the Alameda County Mosquito Abatement District meeting on the 12th because I was in flight coming back to Oakland. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Simon, please.
Yes, I also wanted to report that I attended the National League of Cities. Many of the conferences that you've heard, or the classes that you've heard spoken before, some interesting information that we've heard here already, but for example, the housing element workshop, the vacancy tax really helps with the vacant buildings, obviously. That's something that we should pull back and get that vacancy tax in our city. Also, the maintaining momentum in economic and workforce development. A lady made a really strong comment about providing jobs to those that are released from incarceration, and rather than spending $70,000 for them to house them in a jail, pay them $70,000 to do good benefits to our community. I thought that was powerful to hear. Again, I've heard it before, but to hear that again. Also, as Councilmember Aguilar mentioned, we were lobbying with our Congresswoman Lateefah Simon, which was very productive. We spent quite a bit of time with her, and I think we got some really good traction in bringing in some money to our city. So that was very, very powerful. One other thing I would like to recognize in recognition of Women's History Month is Bella Camello, one of our senior commissioners who I worked with on senior commission years ago. She is one of my top mentors. She was just nominated and selected for induction into the Alameda County Women's Hall of Fame. This will recognize her for her outstanding contributions to justice and a lasting impact to our community. So hats off to Bella for your hard work. And you are an incredible person, Bella. Thank you.
Okay, so before Vice Mayor makes her statement based on discussions with her, I was also at National League of Cities. I guess several of our council members met with Lateefah Simon. On Wednesday, went to Capitol Hill and met with a number of congressional representatives and also with our with our senators representing our state. All of the conversations, from my perspective, were actually quite sobering, and particularly quite sobering with respect to future funding, because I think that what we really learned is that we should not anticipate the same level of funding as we have seen in the past. I think that that's critical to understand because as we face certain structural deficits, as we face infrastructure needs, that expecting money from Washington is going to be difficult. It's not a reasonable expectation. We should be happy if we get it, but I think we should be realistic about what those opportunities will be and the likelihood that we get them in the San Francisco Bay Area. The other thought that I'll offer is that the general tenor at NLC was a significant focus on local government and solutioning. How can we make things better and more efficient? Significant number of discussions around the use of technology and AI. How can we do more with less? Because I think that will be the order over the next coming 5 to 10 years as we work through ever increasing costs that CalPERS is imposing on us. So I think we just need to be mindful about that reality. Today, we are paying for the mistakes made in the past, and that just is. And so I think we want to be mindful about that. Vice Mayor Bowen, I will come to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick and then I'll send my notes over to staff. That way they have more detailed notes. On March 10th, I attended the PPLC meeting with the Alameda County Transit Commission. And then on the 13th, I attended the Recycling Board. One thing of note is that San Leandro did present its expenditure plan and it was approved by the Recycling Board. I also attended NLC and I really appreciate the mayor's comments about solutioning. I want to highlight 2 of the councils that I'm on, Youth, Family, and Education Policy, as well as the Human Development Committee. And in both of those very long, robust meetings, we really talked about how to connect youth to parks, how to address a lot of the issues, especially around mental health and wastewater monitoring, arts and health, healthy housing, all of the things that we've been talking about. What I actually really want to spend some time sharing is an issue of concern, and I will I'm going to read it because I want to make sure that I can be as accurate as possible. I am raising an issue of concern regarding an incident that is now public. On November 13th, 2024, while I was attending an event at the National League of Cities annual conference in Tampa, Florida, Daniel Parra, a member of the City of Fowler City Council, physically violated me. Mr. Parra is an immediate past president of the League of California Cities. I filed a report with the City of Tampa Police Department. The Tampa Police Department commenced a criminal investigation into Daniel Parra's actions. Following the investigation of battery, the Hillsborough County State Attorney's Office, 13th Judicial Circuit, has charged Mr. Parra with 1 count of first-degree misdemeanor battery. It is also my understanding that there is a separate administrative investigation being conducted by the National League of Cities. I don't have any further comment regarding the criminal investigation, the charges, or the administrative investigation, because I believe and respect that the legal process should proceed. It is also not lost on me that earlier tonight we recognized Women's History Month and the importance and urgency to address the systemic barriers and biases that women face, both in personal and professional spaces. I want to send a very clear statement that such reprehensible behavior is absolutely unacceptable and will be held to account. The safety of everyone should be paramount, and with the support of my family, my colleagues, and the city, we denounce this behavior. Finally, I want to say to the women and others holding public office who have experienced bodily violations and acts of harm that you are not alone, nor are you powerless. Thank you.
Councilmember Aguilar, did you have something else?
I wanted to say that tomorrow's the State of the City address.
Tomorrow is the State of the City? Is that right? Okay. Everyone's welcome, invited to the State of the City tomorrow. Thank you for highlighting that. I do want to close our meeting in honor of a San Leandran who passed away, Leroy Smith. I don't know how many people knew Leroy, but if there was one word that is associated with Leroy, it is the word service. Leroy, I met him in the context first of the Lions Club. He was an ardent advocate for the Lions Club. Leroy was always smiling, and he always had an ask. because he wanted to help other people. I had the joy of speaking at his funeral. I have asked that his obituary from that program actually be entered into the record. Because if there's someone from San Leandro that our youth and others should model their life after, I look at someone like Leroy. And how can you not celebrate? Where is this picture? How can you not celebrate this picture? This is a guy that brought all the love and energy from the 1960s and 70s, and he turned it into action. And he turned it into action specifically in our city. And that was super important. Over and over and over, I heard people use the word service. And so in my remarks, that's what I focused on. That he was a driver of service. He was always in action. And, we all will face our time, but I do believe that when we reach that point, will people say that that was a life well lived, a life of service to others? So with that, I'd like to close. I can't tell if you're still in my queue or not, and I apologize if you are. No, okay. With that, I would like to close in memory of Leroy Smith, a San Leandran of the first degree. Okay, thank you, Leroy.